in this world, people were born with a cross on the back of their hand, which concealed magical power. There were 4 types of these marks. The 4th had a short range, but its power and firing speed were quite powerful. This type of cross was used in close combat. The 3rd type also had high firepower, but it had a wider variety of weapons. Its advantage was its use in medium-range combat. The 2nd cross specialized in increased firepower, but its accuracy was poor. It also had a wide variety of weapons, making this badge incredibly valuable at long ranges. Next came the very first cross, which appeared on the young man's hand. It quickly reached its limit in battles, offering no advantages, and its firepower was quite weak. The boy couldn't even activate magic with it. The cross specialized only in production. However, he was a magical warrior, and was conducting an experiment in which he used the power of the first cross, normally unsuitable for combat, in battle. Meanwhile, the young man activated the meteorite core magic. The first cross specialized only in artifacts. When using magical tools, magic had to be applied, but not in the case of normal objects. The hero brought down a meteorite shower on the earth, and a bright star immediately appeared in the sky, which soon fell in the form of a huge meteorite. As a result, he succeeded in sinking the island. The principle of the meteorite shower was to pull a cosmic object downward. It was a form of magic in which the first cross, like the second, could be used without tools. But to use the former, the boy first needed to prepare the magical tools. However, this required time to activate, meaning it wouldn't work against an army. People called the other side of the magical world outer space. Many believed that monsters with incredible powers lived there. They were known as divine beasts, and the young man longed to even fight such opponents, who considered human magic insufficient and against whom their magical theory couldn't cope, even with all its might. This was the youth's greatest dream. In the boy's opinion, those beings were far superior to him, who couldn't use the meteorite shower without the necessary tools. He understood that he needed to become stronger, but with the first cross, the paths for development became fewer. The first method was to study an inexplicable magical theory, apparently possessed by the heavenly beasts, who possessed advanced techniques. This power made it possible to resurrect the dead or travel through time, things incomprehensible to human magic. With this power, the hero could enlarge and strengthen his muscles. However, to master such techniques, he must first battle the heavenly beasts. The guy compared it to the well-known proverb about the chicken and the egg. The chances of such a development were very small. The second option was reincarnation with a new body, but this didn't guarantee he'd get the body he wanted. The young man decided to save this option for last. The third way was to find allies. They were capable of increasing combat power. The young man had come to this conclusion long ago. He tried many times, but his partners ran away each time in fear of the monsters. The guy thought about it because, in essence, he just needed to find allies who would not run away and would be loyal. But he was only considering human candidates, and there were also demons. The hero understood that such creatures would not ally with him, since the demon's goal was to drive people to their deaths. There were other races that could use magic, such as dragons. The dragon leader addressed his tribesmen because of a one-time opportunity. Years ago, their kind had been nearly exterminated by a man named Guy. But now that he was gone, they had nothing to fear, so the leader called on everyone to exterminate the humans. He wanted to add that the time had come for revenge, but he was not allowed to finish. Suddenly, a young man landed on the dragon's head. The creature lost consciousness from the blow, and the dragons were shocked by its appearance, since a special barter against penetration was installed in their home. The guy apologized for causing pain at someone else's ball, but he wanted to show that he was still alive. The elders of the dragon tribe could not believe the appearance of Guy, because he had not appeared for 100 years. The young man hadn't noticed the passage of so many years due to his preoccupation with research. He asked the old dragon not to be nervous, as the purpose of his visit wasn't to fight. Guy explained that he was looking for partners, and decided to ask them where he could find the strongest dragons, and if there weren't any, then those with good potential would do. At that moment, the leader came to his senses, roaring that the strongest of them was already there and that the hero had already found him, hinting at himself. Then, wishing death upon the intruder, he began to prepare his attack. The dragon thought he had dealt with Guy, but when the fire and smoke cleared, he saw a whole and unharmed man appear before his eyes. It was believed that dragon's breath was the same as ordinary fire, but in reality, it was an advanced and complex form of magic. By adding a small amount of magical power to the weak point of the magic formula, the flames began to dissipate. This is precisely what Guy did, and his action left the dragons truly shocked. However, when dispersed, the magical power used did not disappear. The boy considered this a waste of energy and decided to return the power to its sender. The next moment, all the magical power that he himself had released earlier fell upon the creature. Only bones remained of the huge beast. Its relatives could not believe that such a result could be achieved with one volley. The elder explained that the breath was a formula, and if its weak point was broken and destroyed, then the magical power could be stolen. He had also heard that this was the signature of Guy's dragon hunting actions. The guy acted as if nothing had happened and decided to return to the old topic of conversation about strong individuals. He had already lost his informant, so he asked the remaining ones if anyone would like to take the empty seat. There was silence. The dragons did not dare to give an answer. Then the old man answered that to the north of their location there was a temple in which lived a dragon whose name sounded like the Dragon of Darkness. The young man became interested and began to ask about this creature and its power. The dark dragon was sent to help people in exchange for precious stones. His power was real, otherwise he would have died long ago. Guy understood the old dragon's hint that he should get rid of it. But the boy was looking for allies anyway, so had the dragons known this in advance, the situation wouldn't have changed. The hero expressed his gratitude to the creatures and promised to try his luck there, after which he turned around and left the cave, leaving the dragons perplexed. However, the animals decided to release fire all at once, as they believed that the young man would not be able to defend himself from all the breaths at once. The fire fell upon its target with great force. The dragons grinned, fully confident that the hero couldn't defend himself from so many explosions. They rejoiced at having killed Guy and wanted to claim the entire world for themselves. However, the clouds of fire and dust soon disappeared, revealing a young man without a scratch. He had once again managed to deflect such immense power. The guy reminded them of his words, that he had once already warned them not to announce his death so easily. The dragons were amazed and frantically wondered why their enemy was still alive. The boy sighed in frustration. These creatures were too stupid to discern the power of this magic. The hero wanted to leave them alone, but after their attempt to attack him unexpectedly, Guy couldn't forget it. The young man decided to answer their question about why he was still alive. It was because he was difficult to kill with such magic. He decided to demonstrate how it should be done and picked up the crystal. It was a raw magical stone, also known as a bad stone, and could not be used as a magical tool. Guy intended to completely imbue it with his magical power. The crystal would be powerful enough to contain a large amount of force. But by combining it with the spell within the magic stone, its destruction could be prevented by the power of their connection. Such subtle magical enlightenment was the domain of the first comb. The result was an unstable magic stone, brimming with a vast amount of magical power. The power inside the stone was on the verge of exploding as it tried to find a way out. The old dragon couldn't find out what Guy was doing, but he demanded that the other dragons stop him. However, none of them knew how exactly this could be done. He ordered them to use the breath again. He had doubts that Guy would be able to use his barrier for long. Suddenly, the crystals began to glow, and the hero began to bid them farewell. This left the dragon with no chance to do anything. They were all defeated by one man. Only the old dragon remained in the cave. He managed to survive, but he did not understand why he was spared. The boy explained that he was repaying a debt for the information he'd provided about the dark dragon. He also advised the old man not to take any action if he valued his own life. He then flew out of the cave through the hole created by the explosion. Guy arrived at a huge castle standing on a remote plot of land. Approaching the massive doors, he sensed the dragon's mana on the other side, meaning this was the place the elder had spoken of. The young man could already sense the creature's radiating power beyond the walls, and he still harbored hope that the young dragon wouldn't be as foolish as his older kin. The guy was about to go inside, but to his surprise, the dragon itself spoke to him, asking about the purpose of his presence. Guy said he had heard rumors about a dragon helping people in exchange for precious stones. There was silence, and then the doors swung open, and the creature invited him in. Inside, the entire space was filled with gold and jewels, and atop all this wealth sat a huge lizard beast. He asked Guy what his wish was and what he was willing to offer in exchange. The guy, without further ado, immediately offered him to become a partner, and they had to discuss what he would receive if he agreed. The dragon asked him in confusion, and the young man explained that he wished to have someone like him at his side. For his part, the hero intended to provide equipment and do everything he could to make his ally stronger. Then he asked the beast what he thought about this. The lizard paused, then began to laugh. Everything Guy had told him had seemed funny, but humans had proven too modest for him. The boy bowed ostentatiously and thanked the creature. This reaction angered him, because he had not intended to praise the guest at all. The dragon advised the hero not to become arrogant, since he only helped the man for a reward, and if he continued to speak to him in such a tone, he would be killed. The beast lowered its head to the gold, finding itself at Guy's level. Then the guy clarified that his answer depended only on the reward. The dragon rose again, angrily replying that any work he could do depended on this. Species such as himself were extremely greedy, and besides, he was certain there wasn't a single stone in the world worth working with a human for. The hero, looking bored, took out a huge crystal and asked him what it could have been. This stone was very valuable to dragons in many ways, but the question remained whether the young dragon knew about it. The lizard looked at the stone in surprise, not really understanding what it really was. Soon he finally figured it out and asked where the hero had gotten it. The young man explained that he had found the crystal in the vicinity of Mount Ronzia. The evil dragon king Diabolos ruled the region around this mountain about 150 years ago. He was considered the strongest among his tribesmen, and his reign brought tens of thousands of deaths, both humans and dragons. The stone discovered was created from his heart, which contained a rare stone crafted from their blood, known as the Dragon Slayer Stone. The dragon suddenly understood what the presence of this object in the hero's hands meant. Guy smiled broadly and concluded he had indeed killed the evil core, and he could also describe in detail how it had happened. The young man fought him and wanted to retreat to avoid killing him, but Diabolos proved weaker than he thought. The outcome of their battle became clear. Then he returned to his first question and asked again if the dragon would become his companion if he received the stone. The lizard asked what would happen if he refused. Guy hinted vaguely that in that case he would have 2 heart crystals. Hearing this, the dragon began growling, angered by the thought of bowing before a human. He roared and was about to attack the hero. The boy braced himself for the blow. The deal seemed pretty good to him, but now he had to try not to kill the dragon, because dying hurt. He also asked the beast to try to survive. However, when the guy was already preparing for the fight, something completely unexpected happened. The dragon clung to the ground in deep rot and humbly asked for forgiveness. The dragon began to hysterically destroy the castle from the inside, promising to fulfill any wish, if only he would be left alive. From now on, he will no longer behave too impudently. The lizard was willing to let Guy take all his treasures if he wished. Meanwhile, the walls of the room continued to crumble, and some of the towers outside began to collapse. Soon the castle was completely destroyed, and the hero was forced to admit that the dragon was a truly powerful creature. The boy had already spoken, but reminded him that he wouldn't kill him if they became allies. This time, the dragon agreed without hesitation. Although just recently, he said that his race were proud creatures. Suddenly the dragon remembered that Guy had been able to kill Diabolos, and so he became interested in what the young man wanted from him. However, the hero gave him a promise that he would soon become stronger than that lizard. The dragon was surprised by this statement about the legendary evil dragon king, but the boy didn't think he was particularly strong. Then the hero asked his new ally if he would be able to turn into a human. The lizard could easily do this with the help of his dragon essence. Individuals of this species possessed a special skill that allowed them to assume human form. In their true form, they were stronger and more powerful, as they could breathe fire. According to Guy, they had greater capabilities in human form. Dragons retained their physical and magical abilities even after transformation. In addition, they could use various magic, just like humans. But since their magical circuits weren't as complex as those of humans, high-level magic remained inaccessible to them. However, with the power of a dragon, they could approach it. To Guy's surprise, his ally turned into a girl. Then he realized that she needed clothes, so he gave her a few items, choosing a size at random. She put them on very clumsily. Many of them were out of place. The hero considered how young the girl was, given that she lacked even the most basic knowledge, However, he decided to ignore it, as he was planning to teach her anyway. After some time, she finally managed to put on the outfit correctly. Then Iris introduced herself. She was glad to meet them. Since dragons didn't lose their defenses even in human form, they didn't need armor, simple clothing was quite sufficient. Looking at her, the young man remembered his weapons. He handed the girl a staff with a small sphere on one end. It seemed fragile to her, but Guy himself was proud of it. The weapon was made of ultra-pure magical steel, greatly enhancing magical mastery. Furthermore, this staff was so well crafted that despite its minimal weight, simplicity, and elegant design, it still produced excellent results. Iris held it in her hands for only a short time before it suddenly bent over. The hero began repairing the weapon, commenting along the way that it wasn't intended to be used that way. But he knew the girl didn't know that anyway. Soon, the same situation repeated itself. Guy completely redesigned the staff to ensure it wouldn't deteriorate. He coated it with soft magical steel and a highly durable adamantium alloy. Iris began waving her staff around, and the hero shielded his face with his hand, for the weapon had now lost all its elegance. It looked like a barbarian's weapon. Suddenly, his magic keychain began to jingle. But he couldn't remember turning it on. The girl also heard the sound and asked what it was. A magical device called the monster detector would ring when a powerful demon was nearby, and it could send its owner to it by simply pressing a button. Heroes made it to fight demons, but soon got bored of killing them, so he switched it to a mode that showed enemies no lower than Diabolos. Iris suddenly felt awkward, and the young man looked at her with a smile. The young man was looking forward to the fact that they would soon be able to defeat someone strong. However, his companion did not share his joy. In her opinion, normal people could not enjoy such hobbies. This didn't faze the hero in the least. He confidently gave the command to move forward. Iris took the staff in her teeth and sank to the ground. Guy was surprised by her gesture and asked what she was doing. The girl explained that she found it much more comfortable to move on all fours. But the boy knew that if they showed up like this, the enemy would definitely be surprised. He even began to consider ways to incorporate that into his plan. Not far from the hero and his ally, a battle had already begun, and the enemy forces of the 8th class Orc Lord were approaching. The girl used a quantum blast, but she was asked to take her time and leave a couple of enemies. For the young man and his girlfriend, killing the 8th class demons was a piece of cake, as they were 11th class demons, and were also the strongest fighters in the kingdom, along with Reiter, a demigod of the blade. On the outskirts of the border of the kingdom of mirrors, children were playing hide-and-seek. A boy had to look for others. When he finished counting and turned around, he noticed a dark figure that disappeared behind the house. The child assumed it was one of his friends and ran to catch him. However, it wasn't a friend at all who was around the corner. It was a huge monster that wandered around with an axe in its hands. He swung his weapon, preparing to kill the boy. The strongest people in the kingdom were the demigod of the sword, Reiter, and the witch of death, Yuril. The soldiers searched all the settlements and later returned with a report to the commander that the search was complete and no survivors were found. It was a sudden attack by the ogres, and suddenly the knights noticed something frightening ahead. A monster of enormous size came out to them. He proved too large, so they relegated him to the 8th class. The knights realized that the ogre lord himself stood before them. The monster split the warriors' bodies into pieces with one blow. The commander was shocked by the monster's strength, but the man did not give in to his emotions and gave the order to hold the line, because if they lost, there would be no one to protect the people. But the ogre was several times larger than the soldiers themselves. Many did not believe that they could defeat such a giant. Suddenly a girl appeared. She used a binding arrow and hit the lord in the neck. The archer called out to Kaito, who understood her hint without further ado. The ogre was bound, and at that moment, the boy, using the big cut, sliced through the monster's body. He wished death on the bloodthirsty monster. The ogre lord fell to the ground from the wounds he had sustained, and that was the end of him. The knights were surprised that the adventurers were able to deal with him. The girl cast a healing spell on all the soldiers. Them sweetly, if they were okay. The group consisted of 3 people: Saint Noel, 10th grade, magic swordsman, Kaito, 10th grade, and magic bow specialist, Biles, 10th grade. They were able to quickly deal with the ogre, as expected of 10th class adventurers. Every single knight was grateful to them, because if they hadn't saved them, the soldiers wouldn't have been able to stand firm. The boys sent the soldiers back and regrouped, while they themselves wanted to deal with the monster. Suddenly, a roar was heard behind them. All three of them began to look around in shock. On all sides, they were surrounded by the same huge monsters as the previous one. It was a group of ogre lords, but they should not have gathered together. The knights had completely lost faith in salvation. However, a miraculous rescue did occur. The man who appeared used a quantum explosion, with which he instantly dealt with the monsters. The Witch of Doom came to their aid. She was able to kill the ogres with one blow. The stranger was probably in 11th class. Yuril Apendroth considered herself the most powerful mage in the kingdom of Mirzas. The witch's goal was to eradicate all monsters as per His Highness's orders, due to their sheer number. This was beginning to look very much like magical activity, so the girl's first order of business was to search for traces of it. Yuril landed on the ground among the other knights and adventurers. One of the monsters roared loudly and began to destroy the building. Another group of lords was approaching them again. The soldiers were confused by what was happening. The ogres chased after them, wanting to catch and destroy them. Yuril was already preparing to use magic, but she was asked to leave a few monsters. The next moment, the huge monster was cut in half. Reiter fought with such force that parts of the ogres' bodies flew apart. When the monsters were dispatched, the boy slung his sword over his shoulder and told the soldiers that once they realized they were ordinary monsters, they would stop running from them. The knights rejoiced at Reiter's arrival. Both of the kingdom's strongest 11th class fighters came to their rescue: Yuril, the Witch of Doom, and Reiter, the Demigod of the Blade. The boy's goal was to slay the lone dragon, the dreaded Lemaine, who had destroyed 18 towns and villages. He had already claimed over 70,000 victims. Reiter and Yuril were both class 11 dragons, and they alone were sent to destroy him. Dragons possessed power unheard of by humans. Their mere breath could reduce a medium-sized city to ashes. Historically, at least several countries have been destroyed by them. However, those times are long gone. For 200 years, not a single city was burned by dragons. And no other country knew how to fight such creatures. Rumor has it that over 200 years ago, there was a sage who hunted dragons under the guise of training. He could easily kill a lizard capable of destroying an entire country. If such a person really existed, the witch would like to meet him. The number of enemies was growing too great, but the adventurers continued to believe that this was a sign of the right path. They moved forward, leaving behind mountains of corpses. Miknik suffered a minor wound to his arm, and Biles decided to treat him. Yuri breathed out heavily. The right time had come. They told their friends that they would go on together, and the rest of them should go back. However, the comrades disagreed. Each of them believed that they were obliged to go together. Blythe was a saint and wanted to move on. The archer did not want to return and reproach herself for the rest of her life, and the swordsman also did not intend to leave his allies. He asked Yuri and Reiter not to worry about them, because they could leave them if they became a burden. Everyone was prepared to die. Suddenly, the guy was hit by a magical blow. Following this, the shelling of all team members began. There was no doubt, it was definitely a ray of light. A very simple, quick, and uncomplicated spell. However, it was incapable of harming even a small animal. Most mages used it to target their opponent's eyes. All the boys were wounded, even Reiter. A huge amount of mana was invested in a shot like that to hit the enemy in one hit. A person with such power shouldn't have existed. The attacker considered it a stroke of luck that the reflective barrier had worked. The witch had no idea who stood before her. He was none other than the dread dragon, Lemaine, who had been sent to destroy them all. Yuri was sure that he underestimated them, since he was able to show himself in his human form. As a human, he couldn't use his most powerful weapon, the dragon's breath. Moreover, in this form, the dragon became significantly weaker. This was a well-known fact. The terror dragon wasn't surprised by her knowledge in this area. In that case, the girl was going to show him something worthwhile. The spell she was preparing was called Comet Fall. It was quite complex and required a great deal of time and effort. If it worked, no living creature would be able to defend itself against it. The witch had only one chance to win. The dragon used breath only for pests. He dealt with others more easily in human form. The girl noted that he didn't consider her one of them. The guy stuck out his tongue in anticipation. She guessed right, he definitely wasn't counting. She hoped that he didn't know anything about it. It was only a short time before she was completely ready. However, Lemaine became suspicious and shot a beam of light at her to check what she was hiding behind her back. The girl was horrified that he was able to figure out her plan. She closed her eyes, ready to take the blow, but nothing happened, because the beam was reflected and hit the side. Both opponents looked at the young man in surprise. Reiter felt a little uncomfortable getting hit and losing consciousness. Yuri was happy to see him alive, although this was not surprising, since the boy was in the 11th grade. The girl also felt healing rays, emanating from her friend, but she didn't remember him using magic. But then she assumed Reiter had done it only briefly and weakly. The young man clutched the object in his hand. He decided it was time to use it. The witch asked what it was, and then his friend told him about the demon detector. But to the girl, it looked like a simple amulet. Reiter ran forward, warning that he was going to buy them some time, and that the witches should hurry and use the spell. The terror dragon accepted the challenge to close combat, and also decided to use a sword. He and Reiter engaged in combat. The young man attacked with great confidence and pressed the enemy back. The dragon admitted that it was not bad for a human, but it could not compare to him. The swordsman noticed his opponent use a mystical barrier, but he knew it would happen and was prepared. So he cast the spell on his weapon. Now he attacked with 2 swords, which helped knock the blade out of the enemy's hands. To Lemaine, it looked as if they hadn't even tried to scratch him. But Reiter thought otherwise. The dragon had opened up, and their games were over. A huge comet was already flying towards him. The witch thanked her friend, because she managed to complete the spell. The meteorite struck with enormous force, sending up clouds of dust in all directions. The swordsman looked ahead expectantly, and the girl believed that the dragon would hardly be able to dodge. Lemaine was badly wounded. Literally half of his body was missing. He couldn't believe that in this century, comet fall still existed, since only 3 people could use such a spell. After the witch had done the damage, it was Reiter's turn. Suddenly, a smile appeared on the dragon's face, and he asked the boys if that was all they could do. The next moment, part of his body was restored. The boys hadn't expected such a turn of events. They were already confident of their success. Lemaine mockingly suggested that his opponents thought such a spell would be enough to kill him. The witch thought what was happening was a joke. The dragon was able to recover even from a direct hit, and she did not understand how it was possible to kill such a monster. Reiter was delighted to finally meet a worthy opponent. Their fight would be legendary. The young man used his own style, blinding fury. Lemaine was glad that his opponent was able to match the dragon's strength. The girl desperately tried to think of something, and then remembered another trump card that she could use to its full potential. She no longer had the right to make a mistake, because her mana was running out. The witch intended to use Starfall, which was a level higher than the previous one. It also required an unrealistically large amount of mana and posed a danger to the caster himself, but there was no other choice. The fight between the dragon and the man continued. Lemaine created a sword from his own flesh. The next moment, the enemy's weapon was broken, and he himself was split in half. He killed Reiter, but this gave Yuri time to complete the spell. Now the death of her comrade should not be in vain. She expected that the dragon would not be able to avoid a direct hit from the falling star, and hoped that with his death he would erase all existence from the world. However, Lemaine cast a spell at the last moment. He used the air barrier, and the attack did not cause him any harm. He was surprised that the witch knew the name of his spell, even though he had been trying to understand her intentions all along. The witch couldn't believe the dragon could repel a spell of that kind. It seemed as if he was simply toying with them. The girl felt helpless before this creature. In addition, the air barrier formed a dome around them and restricted her movements, so the adventurer could not escape. Yuri had already come to terms with her impending death when she saw a hand reaching out to her. However, Lemaine suddenly took her chin lightly and asked why she didn't use her power. The girl asked him not to be upset, because she could use it on him. There truly was a certain power within her that defied people's understanding of magic. It was similar to the barrier the dragon used. However, the witch herself could not access it, neither wanted nor desired it. Lemaine didn't want her to think he enjoyed such actions, but that didn't stop him from lifting her into the air with his magic. He believed that the girl herself left him no other choice. Suddenly, his spell began to break. The dragon asked the witch if she had done it, but she explained that she could not break the barrier. When Guy appeared, he assumed the dragon had done it all. Yuri immediately noticed that the girl next to him wasn't human. The hero's expression changed upon seeing the amulet's source of alarm. He was disappointed. Iris asked if her companion had wanted to avoid battle, Guy was so bored that he came up with the idea of dropping everything and leaving. Yuri was surprised by his words. Could these people really be immortal? While she herself was having a hard time, the dragon asked the hero where he and Iris had even come from. The young man explained that he had come in response to the call of the monster identifier, but was late, and besides, he was not interested in fighting him. Iris once again clarified whether the guy would even fight him or not. Guy saw no point in starting a fight with someone who was weak and uninteresting, but he couldn't let him live any longer either. Lemaine threw the witch to the ground and turned toward the hero. The girl heard the boy's words about a monster identifier. She had heard about it before from Reiter. The terror dragon angrily shouted at Guy to stand still and used movement restraint magic. The hero recognized this as transcendent magic, and Lemaine was surprised by his awareness, but he was more interested in what to do next. Yuri, unnoticed, watched from the sidelines. She didn't expect anyone else to know about this type of magic, but the speed with which Guy had figured it out in such a short time left questions unanswered. The boy had even managed to disrupt the dragon's barter system. She wanted to know who he really was. Unfortunately for the boy, Lemaine wasn't a monster from the depths of the universe, and therefore very weak. The spell the dragon cast was a complete nightmare for him. Its entire structure looked terrifying. The witch was confused again, because he was able to analyze the spells very quickly, when no other person was capable of doing so. The dragon was angry and decided to try to crush the enemies with his barrier, but the hero only sighed heavily in response. Apparently, the enemy couldn't take his word for it, so he'd have to demonstrate. The next moment, the fragments of the barter, which was shattered by one click of Guy, fell down. On Lemaine's face, Yuril's mouth dropped open in amazement, and Iris began to panic, because she didn't want to die. The hero asked the lizard if he understood the meaning of his words. Suddenly, the dragon flew off to the side. Guy didn't expect to be able to make an impression so quickly, but that barrier was too fragile, and he couldn't even step on it without breaking it. The witch knew that the barrier was of the highest level, and the fact that he was able to break it so easily was beyond her comprehension. Anxiety appeared in the dragon's gaze. Guy was intrigued by how such a weakling could use transcendent magic. He soon realized that his opponent was likely hiding his true strength. In this case, the hero wanted to force him to show everything he was capable of, so it became our turn to counterattack. The young man decided to start with the meteorite fall. This spell took him only 10 seconds. If the dragon did not want to die, he had to strengthen his defenses as soon as possible. The boy called Iris and said that he would teach her to fight. The girl was only required to remember everything well. His spell-casting time was very slow due to the first cross. Yuri didn't understand what the hero was doing, and besides, he had a first-level mark. With a third-level mark, the hero would need 1/10 of a second to cast such a spell. But in the current situation, it took 5/10 of a second, a significant waste of time. Iris recalled that he had spoken of 10 seconds to create a meteorite fall, but the hero had replied that he was in no hurry. The hero was burning with the desire to anger the dragon, so that it would attack him with all its might. But Lemaine himself was in no hurry to take any action. He even pursed his lips at the emerging possibility of defeat. The witch realized that the casting time of all his spells was very slow, because the hero revealed his first cross. The Dragon of Terror grinned from the hero's first-level mark and sent a beam of light at him, which could instantly hit the target, and if he could kill a 10th-rank adventurer with it, then the owner of the first cross did not have a chance. But to everyone's surprise, Guy pulled out his sword and blocked the beam, an action that made the girl think that he was more than just a magician. The dragon felt completely broken. He couldn't believe that a simple person could have such reflexes. But the young man explained that this was not the issue at all. Then the hero turned to Iris and asked if she could understand why he had managed to accelerate. The girl hesitated. Noticing that she, too, was confused, Guy explained that during battle, he'd been watching the direction of his opponent's magical flow. This information could also be used to predict the enemy's spell. He asked the dragon why it had cast such an obvious spell when it could have chosen something more specific. At that moment, time continued to tick rapidly. The witch was amazed at his ability to read changes in the magical flow, because it was difficult to do this in battle. This time, Lemaine was already starting to get angry. Since his opponent had a lot of combat experience, he decided to show him his true strength. something dark began to appear next to him. The dragon was a master of magic. He suggested the hero try a blade that could cut through space, something a sword couldn't. Then he sent a spatial slash at him. However, this time too, Guy was able to parry the attack with a swing of his blade. No one believed such a thing was possible, but Iris was lost in thought. Lemaine was amazed by his opponent's abilities. The young man explained that if you put a spell into a weapon, then reflecting a simple spell with it would not be a problem. The witch was surprised that he considered the spatial cut to be a simple spell. The young man asked the dragon what else it possessed. They had 4 more seconds to demonstrate. Lemaine became completely angry. The hero began to annoy him. He began to change shape, transforming into a dragon, and with it, his magical power began to increase dramatically. Guy was pleased that his rival had finally decided to show something worthwhile. Lemaine transformed himself into a half-dragon, half-human. This allowed him to use human magic with the power of a dragon. The dragon wanted Guy to be proud to behold his true form. The lizard used a magical wave of destruction against the young man. The ball was rapidly approaching its target, and the witch even had to put up a defense in front of herself. Then followed an explosion of enormous power. The power of this creature was astonishing. No barter could protect against such a spell. After casting the spell, Lemaine turned back into a human. He laughed heartily at his own rightness in the fact that people really were too weak. However, when the dust began to clear and the traces of the explosion died down, Guy's voice was heard, continuing to count the seconds. The boy was slightly disappointed that this attack was the most powerful in the dragon's arsenal. He wanted Lemaine to show more abilities. The dragon couldn't believe what was happening. The hero used summoning circles to attack, but instead of casting a defensive spell, he counterattacked. Moreover, his magic circle was too small. Guy explained that the unfinished structure of the spell was very weak. If the center of the spell was hit, it could be easily destroyed. The witch concluded that the boy was analyzing the flaws in the enemy's attack while it was flying towards him. The young man asked Iris if she had listened to him. He realized that the enemy intended to fight to the very end, and by that moment, the countdown had just ended, and the hero directed the meteorite fire. Guy reached out with a beam of magic into space and began to attract the cosmic body. He then advised the dragon to use his backup options, otherwise he faced death. Lemaine believed that the meteorite fall would not be able to destroy his void barter, so he set about creating it. A smile played across the lizard's face, and Yuril realized that barrier spells were his specialty. He'd managed to protect himself from the falling star. A spell lower than meteorite fall wouldn't be able to do much damage. The hero began to doubt, watching the dragon's actions, that he would be all right. However, Lemaine angrily begged him to shut up. In a matter of seconds, the void barrier was destroyed. Then the meteorite itself fell on the dragon. The enemy was defeated. Guy was able to deal with him quite easily. The young man was never able to see anything of the transcendental magic, and he knew earlier that everything would end this way. From the body of the deceased Lemaine, but its shape was distorted, apparently due to the effect of transcendental magic on the body. Lemaine soon disappeared, and the stone could be quite useful to Guy for future research. By studying it, he could learn more about forbidden magic. Yuril wanted to approach the guy, but she was stopped by the fact that his strength was many times greater than hers, despite her status as the best in the kingdom. However, the girl finally made up her mind and asked about the meteorite blaze spell he had used against the dragon. The witch wanted to know the secret of his power. The young man confirmed her words, but the girl considered him different from the one she had known before. She hadn't been able to break Lemaine's barrier even with her starfall spell, unlike him. Guy finally understood what he felt at that moment. It was the witch using her spell. The girl felt awkward and unsure, and therefore couldn't speak clearly. She had managed to interest the boy, and she hoped to be able to force herself upon him as an apprentice, like Iris. Her second-level mark was well suited for high-level spells, but even if she asked Guy, Yuril wasn't sure he would agree. The hero noticed her thoughtfulness and asked her to say whatever she wanted, otherwise there would be no other opportunity. Meanwhile, the witch herself was considering whether she should offer him something in return. She remembered that the young man was interested in transcendental magic. Yuri assumed it wouldn't be surprising if he could spot her, but she didn't know what they would do with her if that happened. In her opinion, the hero certainly had no problem with torture and various experiments. She knew she had to be careful, because any mistake could cost her her life. But that wasn't a sufficient reason. Without waiting for an answer from the stranger, the guy himself asked about her earlier interest in the meteorite fall, and the girl looked at him with uncomprehending eyes. There was an awkward pause between them. The hero told Iris that he thought the witch was interested. Suddenly, the stranger herself answered his question. She was indeed interested, but only in him. There was no turning back for her now, and if she tried to escape, nothing would work. The guy asked his ally again, but she herself was not sure. A blush appeared on Guy's cheeks. He was flattered by the girl's interest. However, Yuri, not wanting to seem rude, nevertheless changed the topic of conversation to his mark, which was level 1 and not at all suitable for battle. The hero was not at all surprised. This information was known to everyone, so her words did not seem rude. But the witch was still worried about why he was so strong. Guy scratched his head awkwardly as he realized the meaning of her interest in his strength. He then explained that it was all the result of intense training and his own genius. The young man had no other explanation. Unexpectedly, the girl directly asked to teach her the same thing and was even ready to do anything. This request stunned the hero and Iris, but then he became curious about why she wanted to become stronger. Yuri said with a serious expression that she was burning with the desire to take revenge, or rather, even kill one person. Guy liked her answer, since their goals were similar, but he still had a question. The hero wanted to know if the girl's sworn enemy was connected to the transcendental magic hidden inside her body. She was convinced that she had assessed this young man correctly. He really knew about it. Gaius knew from the very beginning, because her magic carried traces of distortion. However, the witch believed that she had managed to hide everything. Then the hero asked Iris if she'd noticed, but his ally didn't understand what he was talking about. The boy was surprised by her inattention, and the girl quickly tried to convince him otherwise. In the end, the young man agreed to help her become stronger. But he had something else. The witch felt the tension. The time had come to learn the conditions of her training, but even so, she could gain his knowledge, and for such a thing, the girl was ready to give even parts of her body, if such a need arose. However, everything turned out to be much simpler. The hero just wanted her to tell him about transcendental magic, its effects, disadvantages, and methods of obtaining it. She didn't expect that to be her entire request. Yuri agreed and handed him the book, which contained the essence of the matter, since a detailed account would take a lot of time. The young man took the book and, noticing the author, asked whose it was. The girl explained that it was her handiwork, and the notes contained everything one needed to know about transcendental magic. Guy expressed his gratitude and promised to read it. The hero remembered another condition. He asked the girl to become his companion. She was surprised by this proposal. Then the guy explained in more detail. He wanted to create his own group and was looking for allies. This would make it easier for him to teach everyone. Yuri's mark meshed well with her desire to become stronger, but she also had another talent. Even Guy had been able to grasp enormous combat potential with his first cross, and with the first, it would have taken much less time and effort. The girl happily agreed to the young man's proposal. She honestly admitted that she seriously thought the boy would experiment on her after learning about her transcendental magic. The young man jokingly said it sounded like a plan. Iris was delighted to have added to their ranks, but she was suffering from a stomachache caused by hunger. Yuril, the Witch of Doom, was considered one of the most powerful in the kingdom, but it seems she was carried away by her title, as she couldn't even scratch Lemaine, unlike Guy, who was able to kill the dragon as if he were a child. She genuinely couldn't understand who this man truly was. He undoubtedly possessed incredible strength, but there was also something about him that sparked genuine intrigue within her. The witch was also curious about the girl standing next to the hero. Her magical aura was unlike that of a human, but it was clear she had been learning combat from him. Yuri took out a small brick of food, noticing Iris's hungry state, and offered her a snack. The girl's eyes sparkled with delight, but first she checked whether she really could take it. She enjoyed the delicious food, and the witch decided to find out who she was, if not a human. Iris, without hesitation, said that she was a dark dragon. The witch suddenly remembered that under this name, one dragon had become famous among his friends, who possessed special strength and cruelty. Then she, too, asked permission to ask a counter-question. The girl wanted the witch to help her understand Guy when he started saying difficult things again. When the hero heard the monster identifier, he thought he'd encounter a powerful beast, but in reality, it was just a dragon. However, he still managed to obtain something. he managed to find one mage who agreed to become his companion. Watching the way the allies spoke to each other, it seemed they were getting along. The witch had a second mark, perfect for ranged spells. But it was also worth remembering that the girl possessed transcendental magic, which the young man had long desired to learn. It was also likely that she couldn't use it at the moment. Guy had barely had time to think about creating a group when he immediately managed to find two companions. However, he had bad memories about this, because in the past, everything was fine only until the first mission, when his former allies immediately abandoned him. In other words, he needed to act quickly. He needed to make a good impression on his new allies so that they wouldn't leave, and to do this, he needed to be careful. Iris compared her new companion's name to some delicious food, drooling at the thought. The hero noticed that the girl's comparison had frightened Yuri. Therefore, he should have kept a closer eye on her to avoid any problems. He told Iris that she was responding too strangely. Then he told the witch that, as she herself could see, the girl was not human, which explained her lack of common sense. He began to teach Iris so that she would learn to understand people more. The witch heard this and asked who exactly would teach her. Guy pointed at himself with a proud look, but this did not inspire confidence in the girl. The young man noticed her reaction, and it struck him as very strange. Apparently, the witch considered him incapable of handling this task. After all, he had lived with humans before taking up research, so there shouldn't be any problems with mutual understanding. Then the witch asked the hero his name. When she said this, the boy remembered he hadn't introduced himself. Then he finally said his name, and the girl repeated it in a strange way, and then began to behave even more strangely. She became alarmed at a certain fact, and then asked if he was the famous Guy. This man was a legendary battle mage who disappeared 100 years ago, having destroyed countless magical creatures and completed numerous high-ranking quests. He also saved the kingdom from destruction more than once, and was considered a legend among legends. Gaius, who possessed enough power to become the incarnation of a god himself. The witch didn't keep quiet about the fact that he was pursuing the destruction of all dragons. Iris, hearing this, was horrified and convinced she would be killed. But the guy calmed her down by saying that he didn't remember having such a goal. Although over the last 100 years he had heard enough stories about destroyed dragons, in which he was involved. The young man understood that since they had become his companions, it was best to tell them the truth. So he confessed that he had killed about 100 dragons. This shocked the witch. So many creatures had been exterminated during this period. But she had never heard of dragons running amok and causing so much destruction. Then the hero was forced to admit that he had managed to exterminate them in a single day. Iris, terrified, ran for cover. The guy managed to scare the girl, but he hastened to assure her that he did not intend to kill his companions. She asked incredulously, having heard of a magical ritual that required 108 dragon souls, and she very much hoped not to be the last victim. Fortunately, this was the first time the young man had heard of such a thing, but the question of why he had killed so many remained open. The hero explained that they had all been too hostile towards him. It was simple self-defense. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes with renewed vigor. Iris immediately promised to be obedient, and the hero was surprised by the change in her manner of speech. But the witch also believed that killing 100 dragons in one day was simply incredible, and yet she and the other adventurers were almost killed by just one representative of the race. But, truth be told, the young man didn't think he was strong, but he shouldn't tell the girl that, as it might upset her. So he lied, saying Lemaine was the strongest he'd ever killed. He was curious that a terror dragon could cause problems for a mid-level group. These words still stung Yuri. She was seriously upset, and Guy, coming closer, asked if everything was all right. The witch admitted that she could no longer even consider herself a mid-level group. She and her comrades lost, even though they were considered some of the strongest in the kingdom, or so she had thought before. The boy didn't know that her group wasn't average, and they were considered the best. After 10 years, he thought he'd reached roughly their level of strength, but something went wrong. Guy asked Yuri if she'd ever heard of the book he'd written. She immediately realized he meant an introduction to magical combat. However, the hero also wrote the practical application of combat magic, and the basic theories of magical battles. He created these works 100 years ago, thinking they would help mages improve their skills. He believed that just reading them would be enough to reach a premium level, like Yuri's. The witch clarified that those books had a different title, so the young man decided that he had made a mistake when copying them using magic. Apparently this was the reason that prevented others from reading the books. The works proved too difficult for beginners. Even the witch found much of it unclear. She heard that the teachings from the kingdom's Institute of Magic were constantly working to decipher them. Guy was surprised, as he'd thought he'd written them in the language of the continent. But the problem wasn't the words, but their content. It was too difficult to understand. The hero did indeed omit some key points, but had he not, the books would have been published in at least 100 volumes. He decided to abandon this topic and move on to another about the group's members. The thing is that the young man wanted to take another companion into his team. He had the first mark, Yuri had the second. Iris was actually a dragon, whose physical abilities completely surpassed those of humans. He asked the girl what mark he wanted next. She panicked and randomly named the fourth. Guy gave her a tense look, causing Iris to break out in a cold sweat. However, she managed to name it correctly. He really wanted the fourth cross. The second mark was designed for combat magic, the third for short casting spells. Overall, they were both good. But the fourth, although it had a short casting range, was simply astounding in its power and speed. The young man had already known a swordsman with a fourth cross, and he also suggested that the witch was familiar with him. This was none other than Reiter. The girl was very surprised to hear her friend's name, and because of her reaction, the guy began to doubt his knowledge that the guy was in the same group with her. She asked if he was really talking about Reuters, but Guy wasn't so sure anymore, so he suggested a mistake in one letter. He usually forgot nothing when it came to magic, but he could easily forget people's names. The young man even considered trying to create a memory spell. The witch stood silently the entire time. Then she sadly recounted that Reiter had sacrificed himself in the battle with Lemaine. The boy had been cut in half. If Guy hadn't had a resurrection spell, then they had no chance. The young man apologized, but even he was unable to resurrect the dead. But he asked if she was sure that her comrade was dead. The girl turned around, pointing in the direction where the guy's body should be. When they came closer, the hero noticed that the body was intact. She couldn't believe what she saw in front of her. Suddenly Reiter opened his eyes and asked if they were talking about him. Yuri jumped into Iris's arms out of fear and surprise. The boy began to warm up, telling everyone not to write him off too soon. The witch asked why he remained alive. He was surprised why they were even asking him about such a thing, but the girl told him that he was cut in half in that fight. Ordinary people died from this, but for Reuters it was a revelation. Guy realized something for himself, and decided to tell that the core of the person's magical circuits was in the heart, and the control circuits were in the brain. Even if the lower half of the body were lost, both circuits would continue to function. If a person is poorly trained, they will lose a lot of blood. In other words, he wanted to convey that cutting a person in half wouldn't be enough to cause death, but for that to happen, they needed to be able to regenerate. For Yuri, this was completely unacceptable. Reiter laughed. His girlfriend seemed very stupid to him, but he was glad to meet an understanding person. Then the boy asked Guy if he was right for his group. The hero answered affirmatively, and they shook hands. Now the young man was satisfied, as his balanced team was fully formed. From now on, his group was completely intact and ready for adventure. However, Yuri didn't look happy, but rather worried. The hero decided she thought he was crazy, so he had to make sure she understood that he truly cared about his companions. It was very opportune that Guy remembered the other members of Reiter's group, 10th rank adventurers. The witch said that they were all weaker, and along the way she and Reiter tried to persuade them to return, but the dragon killed the boys. These were the girl's words. Due to the meteorite's fall, they could all be buried nearby. Besides, Guy still felt traces of magic. This could mean that the adventurers were alive. He believed the dragon didn't look at their life indicators, and yet there were many traitors among that race who enjoyed mocking their victims in the end. Perhaps Lemaine was one of them. The boy told his comrades they still had a chance to save them. Then he began using the summoning circle. The witch didn't understand why he started using the restoration spell on the ground. He glanced sideways at her, wondering if she really didn't understand anything yet. At that moment, a hand emerged from the ground. Then the guys themselves appeared. The witch fainted from shock, but Iris managed to catch her from behind. The boys had a lot of different questions. Blythe didn't understand why they were underground, Kaito was curious about the attacker, and Noel was surprised by the dragon. Reiter was roaring with laughter, as the boys were mistaken for zombies. Iris also thought Guy's actions were terrifying. After some time, the hero and his team gathered around a round table to hold their first meeting. Yuri noticed the high quality of the furniture he was able to craft in a flash, which raised the question of whether the boy truly possessed the first mark. Guy demonstratively raised his hand and showed that, to his regret, this was the absolute truth. He healed the adventurers and then sent them on ahead to report the dragon's slaying. During his absence, he himself wanted to hold a gathering in honor of the new group. In the past, all his groups had lasted no more than half a day, with the shortest period being 2 hours. Just a little longer had passed since the new alliance's formation, so the young man didn't want his new companions to break the record. If he wanted to keep them together as long as possible, he needed only one thing: a common goal. They needed to find it and pursue it, for the sake of unity. So he said out loud that, first of all, he would like to define the goal. Reiter was excited and immediately said he intended to become stronger. The witch's goal coincided with his. They both wanted the same thing. Iris timidly replied that she was of the same opinion. Guy didn't remember the girl saying anything like that before, but she claimed the opposite. However, the hero asked her to speak up if she had other desires, but she decided to repeat it again. This time, with more confidence, Iris said that she wanted to become stronger. After listening to everyone, the hero asked the next question: how exactly did they want to accomplish this? Reiter wanted to fight against strong opponents. Yuril was counting on hard work and improving her mastery of magic. In Iris, the two desires of her comrades came together. She wanted both. Guy gave her a look that made the girl nervous, because he noticed that she was simply repeating after the others. In his opinion, the witch and the swordsman were both right in their ways of achieving what they wanted. Combat power could be divided into 3 components: strength, skills, and items. The first 2 points weren't a problem. The hero could teach them the skills, and the items weren't difficult. But it was their abilities that were the difficulty. If they wanted to kill small dragons, then Guy was ready to personally train them. Reiter was surprised that Lemaine was equated with the petty ones, and Yuril thought about the hero's personal training. The Guy assured them that once they gained skills, they would begin to understand what items they would need. This would be the next step, choosing those very items. They were supposed to gather all the necessary materials, and he would take care of the creation. The boy mentioned this at the right time, since his first mark was just right for creating something. The witch couldn't wait to see the things Guy had created. Then came the strength, which was the most difficult part. Needless to say, the boys were limited in their physical and magical strength. Iris's strength would have to surpass all others, and the girl was ready to give it her all. But she was surprised that the boy could sense people's capabilities. He explained, showing the first cross, that they'd been dealing with marks their entire lives. Judging by combat power, his was the weakest. However, nothing stopped them from finding a way to surpass human limits. The swordsman didn't quite understand what the hero was talking about, so he clarified that he was talking about powers that weren't theirs originally. Guy spoke of transcendental magic. There were monsters in space too, called spirits of burning stars, and they possessed such powers. Transcendental magic could also be described by its properties, meaning it could be learned and reproduced. He used the metaphor that when killing a dragon, it was impossible to replicate its deadly breath, and when killing a hound, it was impossible to obtain its excellent sense of smell. But with the spirits of the burning stars, things were different. The winner had every right to take all the loser's powers and become stronger. Thus, the spirits repeated this process until their power became omnipotent. By obtaining even one fragment, humans might begin to harness some of their power. Reiter doubted it. It all seemed strange to him. Guy rested his chin on his hands and decided to ask Yuri about it. Everyone immediately turned their attention to her. The girl confirmed that the hero was right. The transcendental magic within her body was something entrusted to her by the organization she belonged to. But the witch still couldn't use it properly. The young man asked if she could use this power to kill Lemaine. The witch believed she could. The boy didn't think her spirit fragment had just fallen to the ground by accident. He was curious about where it could have come from. However, Yuril was unaware of this, as information about transcendental magic was hidden from mere mortals like her. Only the top brass of the organization knew the truth. In that case, Guy intended to ask those who knew. They would sincerely ask them for the information they needed, with all their hearts and magic. Iris didn't understand how her comrades intended to use magic. Reiter showed her his muscles and hinted that in something like this manner. The witch remembered that she still had memories of the award ceremony, although they were very vague, but the girl remembered that it took place at headquarters. Reiter was ready to head into the path, but his friend stopped him because it wasn't that simple. She had once tried to get there, but only found a crater, as if from a falling star. This suggested that the organization was covering its tracks. The hero asked Yuri about the man she was desperate to kill. After all, he was from there. The girl confirmed his guess, wounded him, they called him an agent, and he was the most influential person in the organization. Guy outlined their next steps. First, they needed to find traces of the headquarters. Second, find a way to obtain transcendental magic. And in the process, fight everyone and thereby improve their skills. To the swordsman, this sounded like a plan, and Yuri had no objections. Iris stretched tiredly and then asked where they were heading next. First, they needed to visit the Kingdom of Mirrors and report on the murder of Lemaine. Once this information reached the organization, the group would be able to immediately receive an invitation. Guy remembered that he had been to the kingdom a long time ago, and that it had been a wonderful place back then. The swordsman doubted that it was still like that. Then the hero decided to use teleportation magic and asked everyone to wait. His allies were surprised to learn that he could teleport so far, allowing them to even get there before those adventurers. After some time, the friends found themselves in the capital of the Kingdom of Mirrors, near the entrance to the city. A barrier, which the government was proud of, stretched over the castle. Reuters asked the hero if he had heard about how, with its help, the kingdom had been saved several times. Rumor has it that this impenetrable barrier was created many years ago by a powerful mage. Guy, after listening to him, explained that it was his doing. The swordsman suspected that the hero would say so. The comrades entered the castle and walked along a long corridor. Guy noticed the lack of security, so he suspected that something might have happened. Yuri replied that the atmosphere had always been like this, since enemies couldn't penetrate the barrier, and therefore there was no point in having a large number of guards. Reiter put his arm around Guy's neck and suggested that they temporarily avoid showing themselves to the king. Instead, he and Iris could go get a bite to eat. But the hero rejected his offer, as he had a small request for the ruler. The boy decided to leave the idea with some persuasion. The knights went out to greet the guests. Since Yuril and Reiter had returned, it meant they had succeeded in defeating Liman. This news delighted the soldiers. The witch asked the boy to report this event to the king, and he promised to fulfill her request. But first he asked to hand over their passes. However, Guy and Iris did not have this, so the guards immediately began to sound the alarm because no one could enter without a pass. The girl said that these two helped them kill the dragon and asked the knights to let them pass. But the young man did not want to give in to her request because such was the royal order. Reiter also began to stand up for the hero and named him, hoping that the soldiers might have heard of him. The guy looked at Guy with curiosity and came to a negative conclusion. He asked the swordsman and the witch to go further, and the rest to follow him. In that case, Yuri and Reiter decided to try to get the king's permission. Before leaving, the young man gave them an encouraging thumbs up. And for the hero, the question arose of what to do next in such a situation. The boys appeared before His Majesty in the throne room, and the man happily congratulated them on successfully completing the task of killing the dragon, as this was exactly what was expected of the strongest in the kingdom. But his friends confessed to him that it was not they who had defeated Lemaine. The king was surprised and did not understand what they meant. The witch asked him to allow the hero to meet him, but the swordsman stopped her because Guy and Iris were already there. A girl's head appeared from the teleport. Yuri was horrified by this, and Reiter quietly laughed. The hero urged Iris to go out, but she thought the time was inappropriate, so the young man pushed her out and then appeared himself. He looked questioningly at those present. The king immediately ordered the guards to seize them. They tried to attack the guy with a spear, but he used teleportation to move the weapon behind his back, creating the illusion of emptiness. The guards weren't prepared for the use of magic. Attacking without thinking was a rather strange reaction on their part. Guy began to doubt whether they'd even heard him. The king had no intention of listening to anything from the intruder. He was only concerned about how he had managed to enter. The young man explained about teleportation magic. However, His Highness was certain that their barrier, erected by the brilliant mage, was impenetrable. Even this type of magic couldn't work through it. The guy asked what the name of that very magician was. The king frowned and began to ask who could have told about this. Only members of the royal family knew about it. The guy calmed him down by replying that no one had told him anything because he was Guy. The man was in shock and then ordered the guards to stop. Then he raised his head and looked at the portrait, which depicted the previous correct one sitting, with a young man standing next to him, and his face was very similar. The king couldn't believe it, since there was a calculation based on age, but the young man explained that age wasn't something one should attribute to a battle mage. In case they don't believe him, the hero has saved a contract from the moment of construction. He took out the scroll and gave it to the king. The man had no doubt that the seal belonged to the royal family. He relieved the guards of their duties despite their resistance. His Majesty bowed his head to Guy and apologized. He had no ill intentions. He was ready to fulfill any request the young man might make. The guy thanked him, and then apologized in advance for his frankness, because he wanted to be registered in the kingdom under a different name. The king was surprised by his request, but the boy believed that without his name he would be treated as a hero, and it would be easier for him. The man believed that he could keep his real name, since it was quite common these days, so no one would even think that a legendary magician would stand before him. Guy was shocked that so many people lived under this name. In his opinion, it was not the best one. However, he still had to register his companion, whose name was Iris. The girl revealed her true nature as a dragon. The king was terrified to learn this. But the guy thought that as long as she looked human, everything was fine. The ruler agreed to fulfill the hero's request, and Guy told Iris to behave like a human being. The boy had one more question. He asked the king if he knew about an organization that gave people transcendental magic. The man's reaction was rather strange. At first he was taken aback by surprise, and then tension appeared on his face. The man asked if they were talking about the Brotherhood of Burning Stars. The hero asked his comrades if that was its name. The girl remarked that that's what the Royal Intelligence Department called her. She didn't think they were good at picking names. It was some kind of secret society. The king said he would order all possible information to be collected. This would take about a week. The process of gaining entry here isn't quick either, so he'll delegate this task to the Knight Commander. He'd like to help them too, but unfortunately, he has more pressing matters. He apologizes. The girl turned to His Majesty and remarked that he would handle it more quickly. He replied that, after all, a king cannot forget his duty and responsibilities. The hero wonders what's wrong here. He doesn't realize the king so often assigns such tasks to his subordinates. The boy replied that he'll wait. The boy and girl exhaled. And the king apologized to them. He noticed this and asked what was wrong. They replied that they weren't on good terms with the Knight Commander. The hero asked what he was like. The girl replied that he was hardworking. The boys were in the room. The girl entered and said she had received a letter from the Knight's commander. It's only been a couple of hours since the meeting. How fast is he? Are they really that hardworking? It would be good if there was at least some information about the organization. What else could there be then? The letter contains information about the Brotherhood of the Burning Star. He was ordered to treat them with the utmost courtesy, but he wants to make sure they, too, adhere to the kingdom's rules. First, he asked for a full report on the destruction of the dragon, Lemaine. The girl pointed out that they wouldn't have enough paper for everything, and if he didn't like something, he would immediately reject the request. The hero thought about the Knight's commander. He said that if he wanted, they would play by his rules. Everything should be fine. He asked his comrades to let him finish the report. He thought that strictness wasn't so bad. But if you repay it, you'll get a bad result. The hero approached Iris and asked her if she'd like to try writing it. It would be good practice. The girl was surprised. She sat down to write the report, but she failed. She was a dragon after all. The young man hadn't thought things were so bad for her. He decided to write it himself. The hero was saddened to learn he wasn't as strong as he once was. He thought he could learn a little more about transcendental magic, but alas, in the end, his body simply vanished. The guy said he was done. The girl thought they'd be rejected. The young man asked her why. She replied that there were too many unclear points. He suggested that Yuri try writing it herself. She replied that she didn't know how to write. Reiter told her to let him try. He sat down to write. The hero hopes that Reiter will write much better than them. Style isn't important. What matters is readability and authenticity. The boy handed the report to the hero. He thought it would be better to take a look at what he had written. He was quite confident. Describing everything in such an overly formal manner truly does sound like the work of a high-ranking official. The hero hadn't thought Reiter could write like that. Yuri said she'd forgotten he'd always been good with documents. The heroes decided to go and report to the commander of the knights. The man began to read the report on Lemain's death. The knight's commander Minos said that if they thought this was a decent report, they were mistaken. He gave them 5 minutes. They had to consider what was wrong with it and with them. The heroes looked at him questioningly. Yuri wasn't surprised. Reiter said they would do everything now. The hero asked him if he wasn't perfect. He started writing something. The young man asked what he was doing. He didn't have any ink on the pen. The boy told him to just trust him. Reiter handed the report to the commander, saying they had made adjustments and asking him to check it. Minos began reading. He said it was better this way. It was even a bit modest, considering they were battle mages. Iris told the hero not to look at him like that. She was just a dragon. Yuri wanted to know what exactly he didn't like. The hero asked his comrade about how he hadn't changed a single word. He confirmed it. Yuri seemed to feel like his job was to force someone to fix something. Guy thought that when they said he was hardworking, he didn't mean it that way. That's why Yuri and Reiter dislike him. Minos looked at the hero. He asked his name. And then he added that the management of battle mages falls under the jurisdiction of the knights. The report said they wanted to form a group with Yuri and Reiter. Was that true? Guy confirmed it and asked what was wrong. Minos replied that he wouldn't allow it. His joining them would result in a loss of combat power. The hero asked if the commander didn't believe in his abilities. He didn't answer and asked about the boy's rank. Guy asked what rank meant. Minos choked on his tea. The man said that their king was truly hopeless. How could he recommend such a blockhead? The commander decides to give him a chance. Tomorrow, he will test his strength with a trial. The heroes are curious about what kind of test awaits them. The next day, the heroes came to the indicated place. Guy realized he simply needed to demonstrate his skills. Someone had confirmed it. Battle mages are very powerful in their own right. But measuring their strength is false. Therefore, for example, they can't simply say that their king is also powerful. Minos noted that the hero wasn't afraid. He appreciated his bravery. He announces that if Guy defeats the examiner, he will accept him and allow him to create a group. The examiner will be a brave 10th rank knight from their order, Ganes. Minos said they probably didn't expect to see someone of the 10th rank here. If he wants to join the 11th, that means he must be stronger than a 10th. Guy thought that this guy was too weak. When he fights one-on-one, he can somewhat gauge his opponent's strength, but he's so weak he can't even gauge their level. Yuril wouldn't know what to do if she were attacked by 15 babies either. Reiter asked if he was truly strong. Guy replied that as a mere mortal, yes. As a battle mage, no. The hero thought about the best way to finish. What would happen if he finished with one blow? Maybe he was hiding his strength after all. So he needed to stall for time, but what if he used his full power? What should he do? Minos laughs. Could fear have really kept the hero silent? He said it wasn't too late to give up. Or, he could try letting the girl go ahead and test his strength. Since she's also joining their group, she still needs to be tested. Iris understood the man's words. Minos said he couldn't allow weaklings to join the 11th rank. If they were unworthy or weak, they would have only themselves to blame. The girl agreed. Minos noted that Iris was a very brave girl. Guy thought that if he didn't think of something now, the dragon would start a fight. The knight commander announced the start of the battle. Iris's opponent asked if she was in her right mind. He was, after all, a 10th ranked warrior. She replied that she knew it. But she just needed to defeat him. The man was taken aback. Reiter asked Guy if she could calculate her strength. He replied that he had no idea. And that was bad. The hero stepped forward and asked Iris to wait. One wrong move, and it would all be over. Minos noticed. He assumed the guy was stopping her because he was afraid she'd die. They were just pathetic wandering battle mages after all. The difference in power was obvious. Guy couldn't tell if the commander was truly stupid or just pretending. It wasn't Iris who would die, but her opponent. He suggested something where they could demonstrate their strength without fighting. Target practice, for example. Everyone agreed. Guy told Iris to break the statue. She answered what she alone understood. Minos asked what they were doing with his statue. Were they really trying to break it? The knight reassured the Lord Commander. After all, it was made of a special mithril alloy. The man calmed down and said they couldn't even scratch it. Iris raised her weapon to strike. And the next moment, she cut the statue in half. The impact even broke the floor. The knight and Minos were shocked. Their mouths dropped open in surprise. Guy looked at them and asked if he should still let her fight them. Iris replied that everything was fine and she could fight. The knight was shocked that she had broken a mithril statue, especially from such a distance. As a knight, he'd be ashamed to fight a little girl. Let her go her own way. So now, it's the protagonist's turn. Gaze thought Gainus had come up with a pretty good excuse. If he was hiding his true strength, he was doing it very well. He even wondered how. They stood facing each other. Minos noticed that the young man had finally decided to fight and told Ganis to strike him down. He smiled slyly and told the hero to come closer. He would show him true strength. Guy thinks his opponent has gotten a little stronger, but he can't see a single spell he's preparing. If he's hiding them too, his techniques are simply astounding. Gainus struck with his axe. The blow almost grazed the protagonist. Minos said the boy's life could not be taken. That was the king's order. He said so. If he wasn't heard, that's his problem. However, the next moment, Gannis's axe shattered into tiny pieces and then flew off a little further. The commander and the knight are in shock. Reiter, Iris, and Yuril watch the scene with satisfaction. Guy thinks about how he hasn't done anything yet. His clothes are enchanted to reflect damage. It's common for mages to enchant their items. He said something about what had happened to him. The knight panicked. The hero silently asked him to stop making such strange sounds, otherwise it looked like he was mocking him. The next moment, Guy kicked the knight in the face. Gannis's horse was in shock. He didn't even try to defend himself. Guy assumed it was part of his plan. The victory wouldn't count until he gave in anyway, so they had to beat him to the punch. The hero began to deal countless blows to the enemy. He doesn't understand why he won't give in. Consciousness has practically left Gannis's body. The wall of the building where the test was taking place was broken. The knight lay unconscious. Minos looked at his strongest knight. Gaius realized that Gannis hadn't been hiding any hidden strength. What a disappointment. However, he had fought to the end. He might be weak, but he had no shortage of courage. Reiter noted that he didn't give up because the hero wouldn't let him say a word. The boy agreed with his comrade. And the next moment he turned to Minos and asked whether he now acknowledged the creation of the group. He replied in the negative. Did they really think there would be only one enemy? He told them not to get too cocky. Minos ordered Yuril to fight them. The girl was taken aback by this statement. The commander said it was logical to assume that if they wanted to join the rank 11, they themselves must be as strong as them. Otherwise, he wouldn't allow them to form a group. Guy is surprised that the man is forcing Yuri to fight him, although he would have liked to see her fighting potential. The girl pointed out that they would damage the arena if they started fighting. Minos told her not to worry. If necessary, he'd call the humans to create a barrier around them so they could fight to their heart's content. Yuril asked Guy what he thought. He replied that she wasn't interested. He too would like to see her strength. She replied that she didn't want to fight him. In truth, she had no chance of defeating him. Guy replied that he wasn't going to fight at full strength. He just wanted to test her. Minos forbade Yuril to limit her power. If she didn't give it her all, he would be denied permission to form the group. He ordered Guy and Yuri to begin the battle. Minos pointed at Yuril and said she was next. They had to begin the battle. The commander asked why he was so eager to form a group. He was too suspicious. He had to prove his intentions were pure. The girl is shocked that she has to fight Guy. Minos told Guy and Yuril to fight. Holding back their strength was forbidden. If he noticed they weren't fighting at full strength, he would deny the group's formation. Guy told the girl to attack him with all her might. He wanted to see for herself what she was capable of. She replied that she didn't think she could win and, frankly, she'd prefer not to fight him. And if they don't fight at full strength, they'll be turned away. She looked at the knight commander. The hero pointed out that he'd told them not to hold back, so they could smash everything here to smithereens. Minos told them to wait. Guy looked at Yuri. He ordered the servant to summon all knights of rank 7 and above. They set up a barrier. Guy asked if it was too late for him to create the barrier. The hero thought he'd changed his mind. Yuri agreed with him. Reiter said he'd never take back his words. He was too proud. 3 hours later, Iris is sleeping soundly on the ground. Guy says that while this is just the basics, If you learn to manipulate your magical power, you can gain a huge advantage in battle. Compressing magic like this can strengthen a spell. Her technique requires great concentration and endurance. It's truly impressive. And it's not just about concentration or marks. The results of persistent training bear fruit. But with this technique, a phenomenon called primordial magic arises. But in transcendental magic, this power is even greater, and that's what he seeks to achieve. This power can also be achieved by combining the power of several mages. But even with what we have, it should still be a pretty powerful spell. The hero turned to Minos and asked if they could begin. He asked the sorcerers why they hadn't finished yet. Why were all the mages so slow? And the hero hears this from the one who spent so much effort creating the barrier. They could finish it instantly, but it's normal for mages to take so long to prepare. The mages report that the barrier is almost complete. The structure is complete. Minos told the heroes to begin. Guy said his barrier would break with just one shockwave, and in general, he's overcome with a wild desire to take his life instead of fighting Yuril. The girl replied that they would have a lot of problems later. He advised against it. The hero replied that he would try to be more careful. But if he died, he didn't care. Yuri pointed out that they wouldn't even get permission later. Guy said that Yuri could start. She could attack him. She began to activate her magic. The mages of Minos noticed that Lady Yuril's magic circles appeared quite complex. A comrade asked him if this was the first time he'd seen stone fall. He replied, something he hadn't heard before, but a comet's fall had never been so complicated. People were shocked. Was she really planning to cause a star to fall? She would destroy everything around here. Yuri says that allowing the enemy to see your spell is already tantamount to defeat. But she hasn't yet seen anyone who could stop this spell. They summon a comet. Minos noticed she'd summoned Starfall. Was she planning to kill everyone here? Enormous destructive power. It would have been effective if the opponent hadn't been a mage. Yuri prepared to attack. The Knight Commander ordered the barrier reinforced. Reiter also erected a barrier for himself and Iris. There was an explosion. Reuters erected a barrier between him and Iris. The mages are shouting that the barrier is starting to break. Commander Minos orders them to repair it quickly. The comrades look at the battlefield and search for their comrade. They worry about Guy. But he stands there unharmed. He said this spell required a lot of preparation and time, but she cast it quite quickly. He sees that she didn't waste her time. Yuri understands that the hero didn't even bat an eyelid. His actions offend her pride. Now it was Guy's turn to attack. He told the girl to try to block the attack. Yuri asked if it was some kind of artifact. The hero confirmed it. After all, she knew he had the first mark. That's why his spells are very slow. But he created an artifact that increases the speed of spellcasting. The girl remarked that this was clever of him. The fighting method he's about to demonstrate is perfectly suited for duels against the second and third marks. She could consider it the foundation of magical warfare. The hero aimed his attack upward. His comrades recognized this magic. Minos told the boy to watch where he aimed the spell. Another miss like that, and he would count it as his defeat. The hero said that while the spell was being prepared, he told the girl to catch another one. It's a multi-layered attack. The commander doesn't understand what these circles are. Doesn't he even know how to cast a spell properly? The girl says that although he hides his true strength, she can gauge it based on the mana flows. Guy suggests they figure out the infernal arrow skill, while the real spell is being prepared. The mages and commander didn't understand what kind of spell this was. Yuri's suspicions were confirmed. She understood what she had to do. She used a magical reflective barrier. The mages are shocked because the girl redirected the attacks back. It's a reflective barrier. She predicted the spell and acted accordingly. That's what rank 11 means. Guy praised the girl. He absorbed the attack. And then he added that this was the minimum he expected from her. And the next moment he used the skill, Quantum Explosion. Cracks have appeared in the barrier. It's breaking. The mages don't understand what kind of power this is. It can't be that he doesn't have a rank. They want to leave. Minos is shocked. He orders Yuril not to dodge. She must strike back. The girl doesn't understand why. The fact that she's even standing is an achievement in itself. But it's just as he said. Now it's her turn to attack. However, Guy doesn't think so. His attack isn't over yet. The girl is taken aback. She remembered the spell he'd been preparing. Guy reminded her that the first mark spell required a very long time to prepare. He advised her to prepare a barrier. Yuri realized it was a meteorite falling. Minos noticed the hero using meteor fall. He asked if that wasn't the previous stage of Yuril's starfall spell. As he thought, the hero was a useless mage. The girl says the commander is an amateur himself, but he speaks as if he knows everything. But the meteorite he used against Lemaine was much faster. This means Guy is holding back. She doesn't think she could have protected herself from a meteorite falling. The young man smiled and replied that the spell was the same, and it contained the same amount of mana. Yuril was surprised. Minos asked what that roar was. Could it really be a meteorite falling? The mages told them to look up. A huge meteorite was rushing towards them. Minos and the mage's eyes widened. He couldn't understand why the boy's spell was greater than the star falling on Yuril. The mages declared their doom and decided to flee. Guy explains that the difference is simply in the compression of magical power. When he fought the dragon, he compressed the spell, reducing its surface area but increasing its power. Yuril was surprised by this use of a mass destruction spell. She still has a lot to learn. There was an explosion. Minos' barrier broke. The man couldn't understand how this was possible. He was a wandering mage, after all. Suddenly, he noticed the remains of his mithril statue. She landed on him. He lost consciousness. The mages are worried about their commander. Yuril survived by some miracle. Or rather, the hero adjusted the spell to suit her powers, just enough to block it. Guy noted that she had learned something in that battle, and that knowing a spell made it easier to block. Therefore, spellcasting speed and combat tactics were more important than brute force. Come to think of it, the knights knew about her meteor shower, but not about the meteorite fall. If he hadn't warned her, she's not sure she would have survived. The hero replied that delaying spells was the most basic thing one could do. It was also a great distraction. However, he couldn't fight with such weak spells forever. Perhaps he could hit him with something more powerful. Minos told him to wait and stop. That's enough. Guy pointed out that he wouldn't recognize his group unless he won. This battle wasn't over yet. The commander said he was allowing them to form a group. He gave them permission. He told them to take it and leave. The hero was surprised that he'd had it with him the whole time. Guy asked if he could cast one last spell. The man forbade it. He said he'd had enough spells. The boy replied that it had been ready for a long time. It would be a shame to interrupt him. The commander shouted. The hero's spell worked. Confetti simply appeared. The commander lost consciousness. Guy was glad he'd managed to talk him down. Yuri wasn't sure his words had convinced him. Iris woke up and asked if it was really over. The next day, someone apologized to Lord Guy. A messenger announced that the king wished to meet him and asked him to accompany them to the palace. The hero assumed it was about yesterday. The man assumed it was. He didn't think he'd blame him for anything. The hero stands in the throne room before the king. The king said it seemed Commander Minos had overstepped his bounds. He apologized for him. And he also expresses his gratitude. The heroes don't understand why they are being thanked. He was incompetent as a commander, but he was well-versed in politics. This made communicating with him very difficult. But thanks to them, he understood how to deal with him. He asked the commander if the requested information was ready. The man replied that, as far as he was concerned, he was sorry it had happened. He hadn't been able to stop him from formulating the groups. The king didn't understand what he was talking about. That some low-ranking mage is now allowed to take 2 11th-ranked people from their kingdom. He considers it a terrible loss for them, but he's quite stubborn and it's difficult to deal with him. The king asked him to repeat. He replied that he had a plan. He would prevent his group from forming and drive him out of the kingdom. The king asked what the name Guy meant to him. Minos began to ponder. Without waiting for an answer, the king replied that Guy had defeated the evil dragon when 2 11th-rank nobles were unable to defeat it. The man was shocked. He asked if it wasn't Reiter and Yuril who killed the dragon. Could he really be that same Guy? The king noted that everything was written in the report they provided. Minos responded that it seemed he had missed that point and apologized. The ruler gave him a choice, demotion or death. The man was taken aback. He was about to object, but the king explained what it meant. He had chosen death. Ultimately, he sent him to a small rural area. Guy thought, this is what happens to those who disobey the king. From now on, His Majesty will decide their case. The hero was, of course, flattered by his eagerness to help, But wouldn't it have been wiser to hand this job over to someone else? He replied that it was done to reduce rumors about them, so everything was fine. The hero agreed, and the king hoped they would work together. Now, to business. The commander was tasked with gathering all information on the Brotherhood of the Blazing Skies, but could he also ask them for information on transcendental magic? The heroes tried to collect it, but it turned out to be more difficult than expected. They don't know what constitutes transcendental magic and what doesn't. The king replied that it is easy to distinguish. If something cannot be described by existing theories of magic, then it is transcendental magic. Then, all their artifacts can also be classified as transcendental magic, since they cannot describe them using the data about magic known to them. The hero asked if they couldn't explain how his artifacts worked. Yuri replied that they couldn't. Guy was surprised. Since he's here, he wants to see what they can't understand. The heroes walked into a room. The hero doesn't understand. It seems to say Royal Treasury on the entrance, but why does it look like a garbage dump? Yuri replied that it was definitely a treasury. Here, for example. She asked him to look at this artifact. She believes it contains enough power to be a national treasure. Guy picked it up. And then he said that it was just ordinary garbage. Yuri was surprised. After all, she was confident in her powers. Guy explained that he didn't sense any transcendental magic from him. Not to mention that half the trash he created was here. Iris asked if, since the glowing stone was trash, she could keep it. However, Yuril forbade her, saying it was a national treasure. Suddenly the hero felt something. Although faint, he sensed a different kind of magic. His comrades took notice. He reached into the box with his things and took something out of there. If you look closely, you can see how the magic deforms around the object. This distortion is what cannot be described by the generally accepted laws of magic. This is transcendental magic. Yuri asked what it was. The hero didn't answer, but instead asked her if she knew what it was. She replied that she had used it when she was in the organization. She has no doubt that it is somehow connected with transcendental magic, but she would not advise using it. This artifact empowers people with transcendental magic. However, since it alters the wearer's soul, the risk of death is very high. Only one person in 100 can survive this process. Guy echoed her words about only one person in 100 being able to do it. He pointed out that this wasn't such a bad outcome. He decides to check whether he will die or stay alive. The artifact enhances a person's body and abilities, but at the expense of altering their soul. Only 1 in 100 people survives. Guy said it wasn't such a bad chance. He decided to see if he would die or not. Smoke appeared around the hero. Yuri told him not to inhale it. However, he didn't listen. Magic consumed the hero. Iris said she felt ill from this magic. Reiter noted that even for Guy, it was too much. Yuri agreed. After all, this wasn't the magic they used every day. The next moment, the hero snapped his fingers, and the magic dissipated. The girl asked if the boy was safe. He confirmed. Transcendental magic could change his soul. That's the best way to describe it. Now he's less human, and one step closer to the stellar beings. His comrades didn't understand what less human meant. The boy decided to show them something. The next moment, something glowed in his hand. Yuri didn't understand what it was. Guy explained that he compressed magic to form pure energy. This is the fusion of primordial magic. This is the fusion he said he'd learn one day, and now he can use it with just a snap of his fingers. The hero had heard that only a few could do it. He himself didn't think he'd succeed the first time. Time for a little experiment. Yuri asked him what he was planning. He replied that it was just fireworks. His comrades stopped him, saying that if he lost control of the primordial magic, the kingdom would disappear from the face of the earth. Guy asks them not to worry. He won't lose control. The hero released the magic. The girl assumed he had released it and suppressed it. The hero told her to just keep watching. The next moment, a strong wind picked up. Reiter couldn't understand where it was coming from. Iris said she was being pulled in. Yuri looked out the window. She didn't understand what it was. A black hole has formed over the kingdom. She asks what's happening. Is this another one of Guy's magic spells? Iris begs him to stop this horror. Such a fusion of primordial magic. It's highly unstable and could explode at any moment, so he made it disappear in this manner. The reason it's completely black is because its gravity is too strong, preventing light from escaping. He knew his transcendental magic would allow him to compress magic so strongly. But the result looks far better than he expected. The attraction is so strong that light can't escape. Could it have created a black hole? This is transcendental magic. Guy likes it. He said that's enough for today. And the next moment, he dispelled the magic. Reiter asked if he could really control such a monstrous force. He didn't know how it worked, but he believed he had become stronger. Guy confirmed his words. First, they need to find more similar artifacts of transcendental magic, and only then learn to control them. Reiter agreed. He'll do everything he can to become stronger. Yuri can't understand who Guy is who could suddenly master such power. He replied that everything was simple. Several years ago he conducted research on souls, and it was very similar to when you erase your soul. The girl doesn't understand why he needed this. He thought he could rewrite his mark. Iris doesn't understand what he's talking about, but it sounds very much like something painful. Now that he has become stronger with the help of transcendental magic, their next goal will be to find more similar artifacts. But it seems there are no more of those here. While they wait for information about the Brotherhood, he suggests training. He asked his comrades' opinions on the matter. Reiter assumed he wanted to test their fighting style. Yuri agreed. She learned a lot during their battle and is looking forward to further training. Reiter said it was his turn to fight. Iris also wants to train. Guy suggested starting with testing their strength and skills. They would follow the same principle as he and Yuri. Reiter would be next. He was delighted. But Guy changed his mind. He decided to start with Iris. He noticed that she wasn't too excited about training. The dragon replied that he had simply caught her off guard. The next day, Iris stands on the practice field. Yuri notices that she looks unusually tense. She replied that everything was fine. He would take her life if she didn't try. Yuri asked about what she had just said. Guy replied that he didn't know. He wasn't going to take her life. Iris reminded him that he wanted to kick her out of the group. Guy approached her and asked if she was going to eat them. She denied it. The young man told her to try them if she wanted. Iris said she wouldn't eat them. The hero said that at the moment, Iris is the strongest of them all, and since she's a dragon, she can become even stronger. She's not limited by things like marks, for example. It turns out he has high hopes for her. Guy confirmed this. Iris was inspired. She said she was happy, but since she was a dragon, she couldn't use magic. The young man suggested she start training with magic. The girls were shocked. Yuri reminded them that she could use magic. Guy said that using magic in combat gives a significant advantage. To begin with, he suggested that she destroy that target with some kind of spell. Iris said she couldn't use magic. The hero asks her to stop talking nonsense. Her dragon breath is magic too. Many dragons think they can't use magic, but the truth is quite different. Guy will help her. He suggests she try firing her breath from the staff. He tells her to simply remember how she does it in her dragon form and transfer those sensations to the staff. The girl understood him. She fired and destroyed the target. Iris was surprised to find that the staff actually breathed fire. Guy told her not to forget the feeling. He told her to take another shot. The girl concentrated. However, nothing worked. Guy pointed out that the first time might be more difficult, but the girl refuses to leave things like that. After all, she is Iris the dragon. She got down on all fours and began to gather fire breath. The next moment, she fired. She's happy with her success. Guy is surprised she fired from her mouth. And on the first try too, but she can't see her target at all. Iris realizes she's missed. And all her subsequent attacks have ended in misses. The girl was indignant. She jumped somewhere. She's got her sights set on the target, saying she won't miss if she gets close enough. There was an explosion. She destroyed the target. Guy thought, this isn't target practice. They should just be practicing magic. Reiter laughed at his comrade's expression. The hero says her skills are impressive, but she must understand that she can't hit the target because she can't see the beam because of her mouth. The girl replies that she's a dragon and it's easier for her. Reiter said the enemy certainly wouldn't expect that. Guy agreed and decided to make things more challenging. He used magic, and the target began to move. He told the girl to act faster. She began shooting chaotically from her mouth. There was another explosion. Iris realizes she missed all of the targets. Guy said the shot was blocking her view, so she better try with the staff. Iris pouted. Then she got angry and decided to just incinerate them all at once. She decided to increase her combat power instead of aiming. It was the complete opposite of what he wanted. The girl turned and said what had happened. Magic was very convenient after all. She would call the spell, Iris Shot. Guy said it was good that she learned to use magic, but he still gave her 0 points for that. Iris asked why. He replied that to use that much magic, he first had to learn to control it. He doubted it would hit anyone in a real fight. The girl said it was easier for her. The hero decided to conduct a small experiment. He put a target on Reiter, and then he said that Reiter's would be her target. That way, he would be able to assess his strength as well. The boy said he felt awkward fighting a little girl. Guy told him not to let her appearance fool him. She is a powerful dragon after all. He doesn't think he could hurt her, even if he exerted all his strength. Reiter asked what kind of monster she was. Iris said she was starting. She shot out a blast of fire breath. However, Reuters dodged her attacks. He says it's too easy. Her actions are easy to read. Iris says it's unfair and asks him to stop evading her. She unleashed a new, massive attack. She told the guy to try to dodge it now. Reiter was shocked. This beam was just massive. Yuri notices that her spell is more powerful than last time. Even Reiter wouldn't survive this. Iris thinks she overdid it. Guy says everything's fine. The guy can handle it. When it comes to critical situations, he's unmatched in his quick decision-making. Reuters says his moment has come. He will show his true colors. He's using his technique, drifting blades. Then uses Wave Slash. He runs to attack the dragon. Yuri realizes he cut the spell with a wedge and dodged the attack. Reiter points out that magic can be cut too. Iris is shocked. Guy thinks things aren't so rosy. A normal person couldn't perform such a feat. It seems Reiter is imbuing the blade with magic. Could he be doing this deliberately? In theory, he does the same thing a hero does when blocking an enemy spell. But it's hard to believe he can do that, and he probably doesn't even understand how it works. Reiter said that now he was through. He took out some kind of ball and showed it to the girl. He mentioned that she loved sweets, so he offered her a candy. Iris eagerly opened her mouth and ate the candy. Then the enemy asked her about how she couldn't shoot with the candy in her mouth. Guy noted that the man had also come up with a tactic to neutralize Iris. The girl can't spit out the candy because it's delicious. But she doesn't know how to use magic. Reiter was about to attack her, but Iris decided to use her staff. She channels magic through it. The next moment, she attacks the guy. And a fireball flies at him. It hits the target and explodes. Reuters flies off. He was lying on the ground unconscious. The girl approached him. She said she'd learned to use the staff. Iris's shot had reached its limit. Reiter says his plan failed. Guy notes that his plan actually helped her development. Since she couldn't open her mouth, she decided to use the staff after all. It's a pretty good way to get her to use it. The hero himself wouldn't have thought of it. Reiter didn't even think she could do it, so he was counting on his victory. Iris turned to Reuters. She asked him if he had any more candy. He confirmed it and gave it to her. Iris is happy to be part of this group. Guy says that since she's learned to use magic, their goal for the day has been achieved. Beings dwelling in the vastness of space are the spirits of blazing stars. They grow stronger in their endless lives, absorbing the power of defeated enemies. Those who have won countless victories surpass even the gods in their knowledge and strength. Yuri can't believe what's happening. Even Guy can't hurt him. Reiter's mana is almost gone. The hero didn't expect such a difference between them. There's no time. He'll have to use their trump card. He asks the dark dragon Iris to save this world. The girl asks him to ask more respectfully. He asks her again to save the world. But she doesn't respond. And the next moment, she agrees. She uses Iris Flame. The monster is defeated. No one can match her. Guy said that even now he has nothing left to teach her. Yuri added that they expected nothing less from her. Reiter said he would throw her a sweet treat. The girl is bathing in sweets. She bites Reiter in her sleep and calls him a big candy. At the time, the guy thought his plan was good. But it seems she only remembers it because she associates it with candy. Walking down the street, Iris says that she thought she had a lot of candy, but it was just a dream. This is cruel. Then she said Reiter was cruel. Why wake her up when she was having a wonderful dream? He replied that he woke her up because she had bitten so hard that it left marks. Yuri asked where they were headed. Guy said he just wanted them to see something. Before the real battle begins, he wants to show them something. They came to the observatory. Guy said their magical telescope was very good, and so they will be able to see the power emanating from the spirits of the blazing stars. His comrades couldn't understand what power he was talking about from the spirits of the blazing stars. Could it be the spirits of space? There are countless such spirits in space. Their battles have been going on for over 1 billion years. From here, they can see spirits 200,000 light years away. He invites them to take a look. Yuri says she sees only something glittering. Guy explains that these are the spirits of the blazing stars. It's impressive. Yuri told him to look. He said they could see 200,000 light years from here. That's a monstrously vast distance. And if they could observe their power from here, the girl must understand how enormous it was. Reiter said that if he continued giving a boring lecture, Iris would fall asleep again. The hero was offended by the lecture's boring nature. And then he asked what the dragon was doing. The guy replied that she somehow associated him with candy and bit him every time she was sleepy. The hero decides to show them, so they understand everything. Iris woke up. Suddenly, a hologram of space appeared across the room. Dragon asked what had happened. Reiter realized how beautiful space looked. Guy explained that what they could see with the telescope, he simply transferred into their three-dimensional space. Some kind of cosmic creature flew past Yuril. She asked what that thing was. The hero replied that it was the spirits of the blazing stars. He changed the dimensions a little to make it easier for them to understand. Now he is about to swallow a planet that is about the same size as them. The girl was shocked that he had devoured her in one bite. The boy remarked that such was their strength. They may find other spirits near their planet, but their power will be no less than this. It turns out that there are a lot of spirits. It's only 200,000 light years away, which means by the time it reaches them, it will have become even stronger. Or it will be absorbed by something even more powerful. That's what power means in the cosmos. And he wants to acquire that power to resist them. They are on a completely different level of understanding of power, yet they still have a long way to go to meet them. Reiter agreed with his comrade, saying that without preparation they had no chance of competing. Guy doubted they could defeat even the weakest of spirits now. And the concept of weak is quite elastic. All the weak have long since been swallowed up by the stronger. After all, they've existed and fought for over 1 billion years. Reiter realized that the only way to approach their power was through transcendental magic and nothing else. Guy confirmed this. Then he said that, first, they needed to approach the transcendental magic of the Brotherhood of the Blazing Heavens. Transcendent magic is different from their human magic. The spirit's power does not fade even after their death. The Brotherhood likely managed to obtain the corpse of a spirit that once fell to their planet. They were then able to extract from him transcendental magic, compatible with humans, and seal it into artifacts similar to the ones he used last time. And since they can infuse such power into objects, they can also mass-produce them. In other words, to extract the power from an artifact, one must defeat the smaller version of the spirit sealed within. If they find the Brotherhood's lair, they might find information about the people who successfully obtained magic and the artifacts they created. Yuri asked if it meant the hero simply wanted to take them for himself. The young man confirmed this. The girl said the kingdom would soon prepare a report for them. It would be nice if they could find one of their hideouts somewhere nearby. Guy suggested they go to the king, who was currently in his chambers. Reiter asked how he knew. He replied that he had used detection magic. The boy remarked that the security chief would have fainted if he had known what he was doing. The hero entered the king's chambers and apologized for the intrusion. The king asked the boy if he'd found anything he liked in his treasury. Guy replied affirmatively. There was an item there, connected to transcendental magic. The ruler was happy to help. If it weren't for the help of the heroes, his kingdom would have been destroyed by the dragon Lemaine long ago. But he didn't want to pay them for their help with such a small fee. If they needed anything, they could just ask. Guy replied that he only needed information about transcendental magic. He asked if they had gathered information about the Brotherhood, as he had requested. The king replied that they were gathering information from a lair they'd once found. They were currently verifying the veracity of that information. The lair was just like that. It was probably because of Lemaine that it was abandoned. The hero asked what the chances were of finding anything there. He replied that it had been completely wiped clean. Almost no trace remained, so there were no leads. That's why he said they were verifying the information. However, the soldiers sent there never returned. The heroes were surprised. Guy suggested that since the soldiers hadn't returned, this might be their active lair. The king confirmed it. The young man said they would go there themselves. He asked to be told where it was. The ruler handed over a map. He asked them to accept it as a token of his gratitude. He regrets exposing them to such danger, but wants to at least pay them back somehow for their help. Guy told him he was quite grateful for all the information he had just provided them. The heroes follow the map. According to the map, they should be right in front of the lair. Yuri wants to ask what the king is saying. Lemaine's dragon appeared simultaneously with the discovery of the Brotherhood's destroyed lair. Could it be that Lemaine was a creation of the Brotherhood? Guy doubts it. The amount of his transcendental magic was too insignificant. He wonders if he himself acquired it by pure chance. Suddenly, the young man sensed something. He said that it seemed they had finally arrived. Another 5.2 kilometers that way. He pointed somewhere over the hill. He sensed strange flows of mana from there. Reiter said he could feel it if he concentrated. But it's so far away, so it's very difficult for him to detect anything. There is a man sitting by the tree. The guy says, Guy's right, but something strange. The only thing he can say is, he has a bad feeling about this. Yuril noted that they're good at hiding. Too good, even. Their mana is too weak. Reiter's isn't finding anything at all. The girl asked if they'd been spotted yet. Guy says they're not as weak as they think. They're stronger than both of them. Reiter says he's looking forward to meeting them. From everything the hero could sense, that man is a good fighter. And if Iris uses her dragon form to attack, will they be able to notice her? Someone sarcastically replied that of course they wouldn't notice a huge dragon. Guy told her it was better to fight in human form. He wanted her to get used to it. Yuril asked if they should even approach them if they were stronger than us. The hero replied that they were the perfect target for practice. And it didn't look like they'd attack first. So, they'd just go say hello. Even though they've made the first move, they're doing nothing. What are they planning? They don't look hostile, but they don't seem friendly either. Had they really crossed paths with an honest battle mage? No, then they would have definitely accepted something. Yuril turned to the hero. She asked him if it could be people like her who had turned their backs on the organization. Guy thought that was entirely possible, but they would certainly have done something about it. He then decided to be the first to show his friendliness. Guy approached the seated man and asked him what he was doing there, especially in such a deserted place. He replied that he was simply hungry and decided to hunt some edible monsters. Guy suggested that there were 2 monster bulls there. The stranger thanked him. In fact, the monsters are a kilometer away. He has the 3rd mark, and it's excellent for long-range attacks. Given this, he can kill them right from here without any problems. The hero mentioned that the monsters might escape. Wouldn't he kill them? He replied that humans were a rarity in this area. He just didn't recall seeing them before. The boy doesn't feel any hostility. Could they really have come across a benevolent battle mage? Suddenly something appeared from underground and wanted to attack the hero. The young man managed to redirect the attack, which hit the bird. It was enveloped in strange threads. The entire team was shocked. The next moment, the bird was torn to pieces. This spell is called Meat Grinder. It tears the target apart from the inside. The stranger noticed the young man's awareness. Such spells were her specialty. He'd evaded her by pure chance. As a combat spell, it offers no benefit, but its cruelty is unimaginable, for such pain is unbearable. The hero asked who she was. He said that you can't answer a question with a question, since he asked it first. But it doesn't matter anymore. He will answer them. He is Legitimia of the Brotherhood of the Blazing Skies. But they may not remember, for the dead have no need of memory. He decided to start with the weakest of you, and he aimed his killer spear of light at Iris. That beam hit her, and she screamed. But she remained unharmed. She was in pain. She asked why so suddenly. Legitimia is shocked that her defensive spell was able to stop the killing spell. Guy thinks this is incredible, because Iris isn't using any defensive magic. It's just that his spell, designed to kill people, lacks the firepower to kill a dragon. The boy asked the hero if he could handle him since he hired two 11th ranked adventurers. Guy wondered if he knew about Yuril and Reiter, or if he'd misunderstood something. Logimia decided to deal with the main character since he still has the first mark, and he is definitely weaker than him. Guy feels an unearthly magic emanating from him, as if it has penetrated his soul. But what it is, he can't yet say for sure. His opponent tells him to stop dodging. Maniacs specializing in the meat grinder spell. He wonders if he's always been like this, or if the transcendental magic has changed him. The hero decides to check something out. He told Reiter, Yuril, and Iris something that leaves him with them. This is just the right opponent for training. They must work together and defeat him. Iris must fight in human form. Yuri answered what she understood. Reiter was glad to finally be able to fight. Iris didn't like fighting in this form. Logimia noticed that the man with the first mark was a good joker, since he said that he was an ideal opponent for training. He wanted to say that he was about to send them to the next world. But Reiter was already beside him. He always reacts quickly. Before, he simply rushed forward. But now he had to act, coordinating his movements with his allies. The guy struck. The enemy stopped. It was the girl's turn to act. Guy thought about how Reiter had stopped the enemy with his defensive strike. Yuri and Iris would attack from a distance. Quite good coordination for a newly formed group. Yuri uses Meteor Fall, and Iris uses Iris Flame. Logimia raised his shields in an attempt to defend himself. An explosion occurred. It was a very powerful explosion. Yuri thinks they were hit by it. Reiter denies this and says the enemy cast a protective spell. He suffered no damage. Logimia said that the girl's magic was quite curious, and the other one's spell didn't belong to a human at all. Reiter says that since he blocks the attack, he has plenty of experience. He wouldn't train with anyone weaker than him. The enemy may look quite strong, but inside he's worried about himself. He seemed to have easily blocked Yuril's spell, but Iris took a significant amount of mana. What did he want from the dragon? Her spell may look weak, but its combat power is unmatched. Forcing the enemy to waste mana on defense is a pretty smart tactic for them. Although the hero doesn't think they'll be able to do it for long. Most likely, the enemy will simply change their tactics soon. The opponent took out a sword, licked it, and offered to play. Does the owner of the third mark really want to cross swords with the fourth? Guy thinks it's just a provocation. They charged. Reiter said it would be fun. He'd make him laugh. Logimia called him a fool and used his lightning ball skill. The guy didn't expect this. He got an electric shock. Lightning ball is an electricity-type spell. It's not weak, but it's not strong enough to defeat Reiter. Its negative effect is paralysis, and any movement in close combat is decisive. Logimia raised his sword to deliver the final, decisive blow to the enemy. His teammates were shocked. The guy realized what he was trying to do. This spell is too weak to kill Reiter, but it's enough to paralyze him. In close combat, every second counts. The girls shouted the hero's name. The villain said that the first one is ready. Reuters ducked, but it was close. The girl said that this was just one of his strategies. Sigils could also be used. Even the obvious panic on his face was part of the plan to deceive the enemy. The boy hadn't expected him to be so good at battle planning. In any case, the enemy dodged and wouldn't fall into such a trap a second time. Especially since Reiter had used too much mana to heal that wound. The hero said that most people are not as careful as he is. At the moment they have one win and one loss. The enemy spent a significant amount of mana to protect himself from Iris's flames. Then he entered the fray, all to prevent her from firing on his own ally. In a mage fight, a decrease in the opponent's mana is a normal phenomenon. The one who runs out of mana first. He lost. Exhausting his opponent with a spell was the best plan, but he doubts it will work a second time. Now it was unclear who would strike first. The enemy said that he wouldn't get caught a second time. Even if Reiter tries to pull off this trick a second time, the enemy already knows his move in advance. There is nothing wrong with a second attempt. The hero said that he was not a fool. Reiter can imbue his weapon with magic to stop the spell. So, the first time, he caught the lightning on purpose. Still, letting the enemy attack first isn't the best move. But perhaps he has some new plan. The enemy began to attack. The hero said that he was beginning to find it amusing. The girl said that she could help, but she might hit the hero. If he doesn't get the advantage, then she will use her power and they have no choice. Even if the iris had hit Reiter, he wouldn't have died, but he doesn't know anything about the damage, and in this situation, it's dangerous to make such a move. They want to help him, but I don't know how. The guy said that he would still win this battle. The girls are not weak, but all their fighting experience is aimed only at monsters. Looking at their fight, you can see that they are trying to solve everything with one strong blow. Such attacks are effective against monsters with a lot of health. But when the opponent has his own fighting style, then all this becomes meaningless. Their enemy, however, specializes in much less striking power. Whether he's an assassin or not, he's an expert at fighting people. For Reiter, this is the worst-case scenario. Although he is currently conserving mana in close combat by parrying Reiter's attacks with his sword, he will strike with magic at the right moment. He uses quite a lot of force on each of his blows. At this rate, Reiter will be able to use all his strength and reach the 4th mark very well, but in this case, the advantage is not on his side. The guy hopes he understands this perfectly well. The enemy told him to give up as he had no chance against him anyway, and said that he would defeat him in the most painless way. The protagonist told him to shut up. He used a double wave cut. The enemy asked how one could not understand such simple things. He did not understand that after his attack he would become too vulnerable. He aimed straight at his neck, and the hero wouldn't have time to dodge. Even if he were beheaded, he wouldn't have time to activate the healing. Things were bad. The enemy said he was almost finished with him. The main character said that he is now a debtor. The girl told him not to think about trying to kill him with one blow. He is a thinking person, not a stupid monster. The guy was curious if the hero would be able to change his fighting style. Reuters replied that he understood everything. He put in a lot less mana, but his attacks were still useless against him. The enemy said that the hero did not make the attack he had planned and deceived him. The hero said that the less mana he uses, the more often he can cast spells. His mental acuity before critical moments was astounding. The easiest way for 4 marks to defeat an opponent is strike him down with a flurry of his quick, weak attacks. The hero began to approach the enemy. The guy replied that he wouldn't succeed, and that he wouldn't be able to impress him with cheap tricks. The girl told him not to forget that they were still there, and he wouldn't be able to leave. The enemy said it was funny. Although they have always fought against monsters, they have no experience in dueling with people, but they know their business. Her spell speed was astonishing. She had prepared them in advance. They wanted to defeat him with his own tactics. The main character caught the enemy. The guy said not to underestimate him. A stone was thrown at him. Lifting them is already problematic, but with her strength, it is not a problem. The hero told him to stop being distracted and struck him with a new technique. They succeeded in everything. Considering that up until now they had relied only on brute force, it was quite surprising that they were able to learn from their mistakes and develop a battle plan against him. After all, a real fight is much better than simple training, but that's not all. The protagonist said that it was all over and told him to tell everything he knew about the Brotherhood of the Blazing Skies. The enemy said they were very funny. It was all a trap. He hid his wounds, so Reiter's plan backfired on him. This spell is hidden and activates when cast, but it's not particularly powerful. The heroes saw nothing. They were all blinded. Everything went as he planned, judging by the fact that more was spent on the girl, her mana. He is afraid of the most. He really is a good fighter. He hadn't fought like this for a long time, and for his wasted time he would send everyone to hell. It takes a long time to prepare and consumes a lot of mana, but it is a dangerous and powerful spell, ideal for finishing off an enemy. Although it is difficult to fight with rank 11 in the end, everything is as usual. Even that guy's leadership didn't help them. People will never become stronger under someone else's leadership. The enemy asked where he was. The guy replied that they had done a good job. The enemy was surprised that some pathetic mage with the 1st mark was able to block his fiery blast. The hero apologized for the fact that things didn't work out. They lost to one person, and their eyes were watering, and they could not see anything. The guy said that they simply don't have enough experience. Fighting people and monsters is very different. Although there were 3 of them, Reiter did most of the work. They hardly worked as a group. The guy said that even simply understanding your mistakes is already considered excellent training. The enemy said that he would defeat them. The guy told them not to worry and that he would sort it out completely. The enemy said that he really is the weakest among them, which means that his barrier withstood the explosion simply by luck. The guy said that he decided that he would only use a spell of his level, otherwise it would not be training. The enemy asked what he was saying. He replied that he was simply weakening himself so that he could fight him properly. The enemy asked for whom he was using it and who had given him permission to command in this way. The guy said that his spell might be weak, but his technique was flawless, and if he didn't like something, then he should show him what a real fight was, and he would remove the restriction. It was a shadow strike. But he used an improved version of the darkness on them, even though he's arrogant, but he tried to kill him before he could do anything. It was a good low blow. The enemy said that he does not let down his guard, and that mages with the first mark can only survive by constantly fleeing the battlefield. The guy said he would love to fight him in a one-on-one fight, but it was just training. So he can't just let them watch. The girl asked about their new plan. He said that the girls were under a spell, and Reiter should not pay attention to their spell and just attack, so they would finish everything in one go. Guy gave them instructions. He said to show them what victory means. The girl asked if he was sure. The guy asked if she doubted their victory. She replied that this was true, because that was how they had acted before. If Reiter went into close combat again now, she and Iris wouldn't be able to use the spell without damaging him. But the point is that then Reiter fought alone, and accordingly, their combat power will decrease. If he could just step back for a moment so they could attack, then they might have a chance. He asked if she thought his strategy was losing. The girl said she was just not sure. If they focus on numbers, then they will become weaker, and it will be easier for the enemy to defend against them. This means he can easily pick the right moment to attack and hit with some powerful spell himself. The guy said that if you take all this into account, you need to choose the best plan. He will not interfere in their battle. For them now, with the best plan, will be to use the Flame of Iris. It can destroy magic and is difficult to block, causing the enemy to spend a lot of mana to defend against it. But the enemy can simply dodge, so you need to prevent him from doing this. Guy asked how this could be done. The girl said that Reiter should do everything possible to take the blows himself. In National, Iris apologized. The guy said that her reasoning was correct. The girl was happy about this. Reuters asked if she wanted to explain. Guy said that it would be easier to show than to explain, and besides, the enemy was already waiting for them. The day was drawing to an end. He asked if they thought they could beat him, if the guy with the first mark joined them. Guy told him not to let his guard down. Yes, he can only use basic spells, but he also dispels the spell that he is currently trying to cast all the time. The enemy said that he was very observant. He said that in that case, he no longer had to hold back. The hero simply needed to be constantly distracted while the girls hit him with spells. It turns out that even if their spell hits him, he will still have to stand until victory. Guy said that everything was as it should be. They won't hurt him, and he doesn't have to worry about that. Reuters will likely be the one to deliver the final blow. As he said, ignore their spells and fight with all our might. The hero said that he didn't quite understand him, but since he says so, that's how it should be. We started to attack. The enemy said that he became stronger. The guy replied that this time he would definitely beat him. Guy told the girls to begin. They asked if everything would be okay with Reuters. The man told them not to worry. The enemy couldn't believe that they decided to sacrifice their partner to defeat him. He wanted to erect the barrier as quickly as possible. The guy said that he didn't know anything. He was only told to bother him and that he was not in any danger. Reuters mocked the idea that he was afraid. The enemy did not understand why he was unharmed. He didn't understand what was happening. A barrier was placed on him. Gui did it. The guy with the first mark. He said that such a simple barrier would not be enough to stop their spell anyway. A new barrier was created. Each time he renewed the barrier. It's hard to believe he doesn't even slow down while casting the spell, and still puts up so many defensive barriers. The first marks are very slow, and that guy shouldn't have been able to do that. Guy said it's not as difficult as it seems at first glance. If he can predict the outcome of a fight, given that he's already seen him fight, he doesn't think he'll change in any way or use new skills. The enemy said that this nonsense was impossible to predict a battle with such accuracy. He would never believe it. Reiter said it might be impossible, but he was doing it, and his injuries were starting to slow him down. They succeeded. The guy said he had mixed feelings because he didn't think he was easy to predict. He said it was time to end it. The enemy said he wouldn't die. That simple. Guy said that the hero was safe. Reiter said he wasn't even scratched. They'd only cast one spell each. The girl asked if he'd known from the start that it would end like this. The hero wondered if he could predict everything that happened. Guy replied that he had already seen them fight and understood their attacks and actions, and that everything else was not so difficult to predict. Knowing this, he prepared a bunch of barriers in advance. Guy confirmed this. He said that analyzing your combat capabilities is very important. If they know the capabilities of your allies and observe the enemy well in battle, then even such simple spells will be of great value. Guy said he wanted Yuri to take on this role. The girl said she didn't think she would ever be able to do what he did. He replied that this was because she simply had little combat experience yet, and, moreover, he was not talking about her doing this now. These were just plans for the future. Since Reiter had a 4 mark, his specialization is close combat, so he should only practice it. Since she's a dragon, she's not suited for spells or complex ones. The girl said she understood, and that meant she'd have to use simple, powerful spells. Well, if she studied magic theory and could control her mana better, then they could use more powerful spells. She was offered the chance to study for at least a month. He meant spending the entire day studying, except for naps. She would be allowed to eat during her studies. Speaking about the theory of magic, Reiter knows and understands it better than all three. His sword technique doesn't just rely on strength. It seems like he created it based on the principles of magic. The same goes for his runes on his body. They are well made, but they are made based on theories that are considered old. He's also quite good at paperwork, although you wouldn't know it from looking at him. But he looks like a real scientist. The girl was glad that they finally won. They came there to find the lair, the Brotherhood, and take their magic. All their other habitats are abandoned. This is the only place for which they even imagined a human guard, which the three of them couldn't defeat the first time. The girl said that she couldn't see anything, but she felt that there was something there. Guy said that he couldn't sense any cloaking spells, and that the entrance must probably be underground. Now they will try the spell, detection, and then see if he sees anything or not. There was such a large space under their feet. It appears that the lair was made under the buildings that were there before. Once the entrance is found, they must go. The girl said that the place where she was looked exactly like this. Only the top management had access to the underground structures. She didn't feel the presence of anyone alive there. I agreed with her. Iris said that meant they had nothing to fear. They were trapped. She said it would have been much better if they had told her earlier. Since she was a dragon, there was no need to worry, but it was still a little unpleasant. Whoever set them up certainly didn't expect a dragon. It turns out that their entire path is full of traps, despite all its appearances. For their safety, he will first put up a barrier, and then they will continue on their way. Although there are plenty of traps there, you can deal with them without magic. The girl agreed and said that they looked much lighter than the fight they had upstairs. The guy said it was kind of weird to think that the traps were the main purpose there, considering they left a killer up there. They were just there to slow them down. There was a barrier in front of them. They explored the Brotherhood's lair at the end of a corridor full of traps. They find a door with a barrier. It seems like it should protect something valuable. But his instincts tell him something is wrong. The guy said that if they want to break him, he can help. The girl wondered if all this was really from criminals. They were curious about what was behind the door. Iris hoped there was treasure there, but the door didn't look like a vault. They were wondering what to do with her. Guy said that under no circumstances should she be knocked out. It's too fragile to be a barrier. This could be a trap. There was some strange magic on the barrier. The girl assumed that it was a curse. It wasn't like him, but if that was the case, there had to be a device there that was tuned to that kind of magic. He will try to find out now. There was a mana compression device at the bottom. The girl was surprised that he was able to sense it from such a weak flow of mana. What types of traps are very common in such places? If the magical connection between the door and the device is broken, the trap will trigger and explode everything. The guy said that the trap had already worked, and they have about 10 minutes left. Reuters asked how exactly it worked if they didn't even touch the door. Gallia replied that it was because of the guy upstairs. It seemed the device was receiving another signal from outside, and they had just cut it off. The girl said that we needed to leave as soon as possible. They had about 10 minutes to escape. Iris said that she could turn into a dragon and they would all fly on her back. Guy said he wanted to speak out. Since we needed to leave quickly, he suggested using magic. The girl said he'd seemed calm up until that point, so she thought he didn't want to leave. The guy said he figured since they had about 10 minutes, there was no need to rush. Guy told them not to worry as he had created a barrier. He asked the girl to look in one place. She asked why he'd teleported them there, as they were supposed to get far away from the place. The hero told her not to worry, as he wouldn't let anything explode. This place is a valuable source of information about the Brotherhood. There must be a lot of clues there about them and their work, so he will stop the device. They were clearing the land. Well, what they pecked at disappeared, which means they saved them. It's the magic of storage. Items are disassembled, placed in a special space, and reassembled there, but this is very expensive. Even though he says so, it can't really be that simple. They could stop or destroy the device, but then the layer would suffer greatly. And if they lost the information, they would be left with nothing. The girl never imagined that the magic of storage could be used like this. Reiter said it was good when things weren't stored in pockets. They got to the device. There were about 5 minutes left before the explosion. This is what the device looked like. The magic inside seemed very dark and unpleasant. It looked like the one Guy had shown them in the treasury. Only there he controlled everything, but here, everything was already set up to explode. He said that they shouldn't disarm it. If you carefully release the magic outward, the device won't explode. The device was built with exceptional precision, and it looked like it was never intended to blow up the place. Originally, it may have been used for other purposes, where something was required from the primordial magic. The guy asked the girl if she had ever seen anything like this. She said that it was probably once. It happened in the lair where she was. It was created to preserve the primordial magic and channel it through the body, influencing the soul and making the wielder stronger. At least, that's all she heard back then. In short, a device of this type was intended to introduce primordial magic into the human soul. This will give great power for a time, but will greatly distort the soul and personality. The guy said that she was well aware of this. They understood how to make them stronger. The girl suggested that this had once been one of his experiments. Guy denied this and said that her experiments were based on different methods. He said that forbidden magic also affects the soul, and this device from transcendental magic is somewhat similar. The guy asked what he thought would happen if he used transcendental magic on an already corrupted soul. The girl said she couldn't even imagine. She thought the soul wouldn't be able to withstand it. Guy said that transcendental magic can compensate for all the shortcomings of the soul. There is a high chance that if you successfully absorb it, you can become stronger. Iris said that when she sneezes and accidentally releases her flame. She said that she was going to sneeze and let out a flame. The girl apologized. The boy never thought that the flame would have such a drawback. The mana from the device was getting out of control. Reiter said there was too much mana and it wasn't good. The girl said that she would try to seal it with a barrier. The pressure was too much. Even though it adds more layers of protection, mana still breaks through no matter what. She was out of control, and it was necessary to retreat. The guy thanked her for slowing it down, and it really helped. Guy wanted to compress mana using transcendental magic. He wanted to squeeze her and regain control over her. This way, it will bring the device back to normal. He managed to restore the balance of the device. If the original mana was returned and the device was repaired, it could be used again. The girl said she would never have thought that it could be controlled. The hero said that he had already done this once, and without that experience, it would have been difficult for him. Iris said she was very sorry and she would be more careful. Now she should understand why it is important to control her own mana. She should study hard to keep it under control. The girl said that she would do everything in her power. In any case, what just happened had nothing to do with Iris's fire. The device simply broke. The guy said he was counting on her. Guy said it was time to finish the excavations and suggested we see what was inside. They even used detection magic, but they still didn't find anything useful. There was no food or treasure there. Reiter said the burnt piece of something could have been some kind of document, but it was completely burned. If it turned to ashes, he could restore it, but these ashes are so fine that they cannot be restored. All that was left there was just trash, the Brotherhood leaving its refuge more carefully than he thought. The only thing left there was the mana compression device. Considering the abilities of the assassin guarding the base, it can be seen that the explosion was not part of their plan. His abilities are far greater than the combined strength of 2 rank 11 adventurers and a dark dragon. It's safe to assume his defeat was simply one of the Brotherhood's possible calculations. If he had not been defeated, they would soon have taken the device and conducted their experiments somewhere else. If you look at how the traps are set, everything comes together in your head. Personally, he doesn't think this device will give them any information about other shelters. Guy said he didn't think so either. This device is needed for conducting experiments on souls. The transcendental magic that the Brotherhood followed is aimed at using the power of the soul. As he said earlier, the soul can be distorted by compressed mana. If the fusion of such energy is successful, then you can become stronger. But the chance that your soul and personality will be broken is also high. However, souls distorted in this way react differently to such magic. If the Brotherhood really did conduct some experiments using the device, then they will also conduct it and create a distorted special soul. In this way, they will be able to seek their refuge based on the reaction of such a soul to the distortion of energy around. But there are no guarantees on this account. However, they could have thought of such an option. Reiter asked if he wanted to try it on a living creature. The girl thought she should take responsibility and volunteer, because she was causing a lot of trouble. The guy said she was a dragon and her soul was different from a human's. He said that he had taken care of everything in advance. Guy said there was a better option since he had also done soul research. That thing mimicked a human soul, but was created using magic. It was called a pseudo-soul. He suggested trying to use the device on that thing. Reiter said he couldn't even imagine how to do such a thing. Guy said that it took him a lot of power and resources to create it, but it was better than using a person. Judging by what is written there, the degree of compression should be exactly this. If they follow these instructions, they will get the same characteristics as other shelters. The girl asked what happened, and thought that the experiment had failed. The guy said that everything was just the opposite. There was a core there, and all they needed was the magical distortion caused by the device. And they managed to get it. Now they just need to find exactly the same distortion. She didn't quite understand the principle underlying all of this. She didn't understand how they would search for the distortion. Guy said they use familiars. He made them with the ability to search for exactly the same soul distortions. First, they will search the kingdom and surrounding territories. Even his search methods were radically different from the norm. He hadn't expected them to be so close, so he'd have to wait. And while they waited, he offered them something to eat. The guy said it would be lunch, while reading a book about the theory of magic. Iris said she'd try. Guy asked how they were going with the book on magical theory he had given them, and he asked them to tell him if there was anything they didn't understand. Reiter said there's nothing special so far. The book is quite difficult, but it begins to make sense once you study the material carefully. Is the book he's holding a collection of the latest theories of magic? He not only understands the differences between traditional magic, but he's also studied everything. The guy decided to ask about a detailed explanation of the book. Guy said that this book includes collections of magic. Written a couple of 100 years ago, there are no theoretical errors in it, and it is the best book of its kind. It was written about the power of spells. It said that it had already reached its limit and could not be higher, but his power surpassed everything written on it in that book. The guy told her to read carefully, as everything should be described below. The amount of mana that can be poured into a spell and recreated. This means that before, this was the limit of magic, which is rapidly developing. And, as new theories emerge, the old ones no longer make sense. The girl said she used to think practice was more important, but she now thinks theory is also very necessary, and it will be difficult to learn all this and apply it in practice. He asked how Iris was doing. She said that she was now reading the 3rd page. This is despite the fact that the first one is the cover, and the second one is the table of contents. Iris said the book was difficult. This was an introduction to magic for beginners. For first-grade elementary school students. There was a school that taught magic to those just entering first grade. It was a textbook from a prestigious academy, and the writer wouldn't say it was particularly easy there. If it's for first graders, then there should be just enough text for children her age. The familiars returned faster than he thought. There was a reaction. Well, there had been nothing there for at least 100 years. This kingdom seems to be a state. But at the same time, it is not. They have a name, but the state itself has long since ceased to exist. A group of bandits named it that. It's the worst place in the world. Information about them doesn't go beyond the borders of the state, so he can't say what it's like there now. Guy said it was to their advantage. The girl asked him a question. He said that this is because, if they destroy everything there will be no international scandal. The girl said that she believed that this was precisely the case, that neighboring states could not interfere. There was another kingdom nearby. There was a gorge between them, which served as a border. The girl asked if he knew this place. The guy asked her why she thought so. She replied that she was just guessing. Guy said that maybe he fought there in the past. The girl said that she could not say for sure whether the gorge had always been there, but they say that it was created by attack magic, which is why it is called the 12th Gorge. The guy thought he had gone a little overboard. There were 11 more such gorges. Many places were named in his honor. It was difficult for the guy to remember everything. Reiter said it was the most common name in the world. Guy asked why they were using random people's names to name things. The guy said it was because he was involved in all of them. He'd heard that 200 years ago, he'd put cartographers in a difficult position with his exploits. The girl asked who was his enemy at that time. Guy said that if we take the period 200 years ago, then it is a dragon. He felt sorry for the cartographers. His magic had caused them trouble from now on. He would try to use it more carefully. There was a high probability that there was a Brotherhood hideout there, so they had to take over the kingdom. Reiter said he agreed and said to make it the 13th Gorge. The girl said that she thought something like this already existed. The guy said he saw nothing there except farmland. Guy said it was because they were using a teleportation ban. They were now about 5 kilometers from the city center. He wanted to make a surprise attack, but plans changed. They had to get closer using magic and stealth. It was pretty quiet there. They look like settlers looking for land. He doesn't even know how to describe them normally. Reiter asked if he was sure that the Brotherhood's hideout was somewhere nearby. Guy said that they wouldn't have set up teleportation just like that, which means they want to hide something. They heard the voices of people. The man said that there was still a lot left there. He told the other man that, if he didn't want to work, he would be punished here. Reiter said he took it back because it wasn't all that quiet there. There was a lot of work there, and those who are working now may well be people with a difficult past. The guy suggested that they could have been settlers, but the Brotherhood took control of them. The girl said that she would not allow those who invented sweets to be mocked. Guy said that if they punished him, their cover would go down the drain and it would be better to just put him to sleep. The man continued screaming. The guy said that if this is really a brotherhood, then they will free them by destroying their shelter. Reiter asked if this was the place his familiar had pointed him to. Inside was a man whose soul had been corrupted by the device. Guy replied that he believed there could be no mistake. The two who guard the gates are combat magicians and are very strong. That's exactly it, so their disguise won't work anymore. The girl asked what they were going to do. The guy didn't answer, saying it was obvious. They will declare war on them. She assumed he had used a teleportation blocker. Guy confirmed this and said that it was exactly the same as the one at the entrance to the kingdom, only it forbade him from teleporting not inside, but out. Their goal was to gather information so that no one could escape. They needed to cut off all escape routes in that shelter. There were also underground passages, and he included them in the spell's range of effect. The guards didn't understand what they had done. They realized that this was an enemy attack. Reiter didn't believe that they would simply defeat them and not find out the reason for the attack. The girl said that the fraternity had no good intentions from the very beginning, and they were used to such attacks. He dispelled their magic with one blow. That's what happens when the difference in strength is great. The guards realized that it was an 11th rank swordsman, so they decided to retreat. Guy was very surprised. By ordering a retreat, they must be guarding their information very carefully. The girls said that they would not leave so easily and would not forgive them. Reuters asked if they were confident they were holding back their forces. He said that if they had given them another minute, they would not have left a single stone there. Guy said that if possible they should take them into custody, as he would appreciate any information. The girl said that if the situation allowed her, she would do it, but she said that suicide was part of the Brotherhood's policy. They have been brainwashed and stripped of their own will. Their very existence consists only of obeying the rule. If they knew they couldn't escape, they would have gone against themselves. The guy told me to prepare in advance so that they wouldn't destroy anything. The girl suggested that it was a meteorite fall. Guy confirmed this. She said that he rewrote the formula and tweaked it a bit. He said it wasn't exactly freezing magic, he just made it so that the meteorite's fall would freeze the place where it fell. When people and things are frozen, they are more easily damaged and broken. The girl said she was getting cold. Reuters said she simply didn't have enough muscle. Guy said that the enemy decided to use transmission magic. He simply intercepted the signal. Because conversations are also information. All materials were classified. This minimized information leakage. Someone was able to block the freeze. If anything, they are quite strong and competent. But their professionalism will not allow them to use the program so carelessly. It turns out that their message is just a trap. He found the magic of other guys down below, but their power is much higher than those who were now. There is still someone with distorted mana, and perhaps this is the one they are looking for. The heroes asked what they should do. Guy replied that he proposed to accept their invitation. There was a passage right in front of them. The girl said that everything was frozen. Even the floor froze and became slippery. Iris said that if they can skate well on ice, they can easily do as she does. Guy asked how she would break. The girl said that attacking without warning is the act of a coward. The guy said she'd walked right into their trap and asked if it really hurt that much. She replied that it wasn't that bad, but still unpleasant. The men saw that there had been a direct hit and were surprised that she remained alive. Guy said the trap had failed and said to hope they had secret materials with them. The man said he thought they were coming for information and said why not try to get it from him himself. He said that if they don't defeat them all, nothing will work. There were about 50 opponents in front of them. If the odds were not in their favor, they would burn any material information. Guy said that if he doesn't give it, he will take it himself. The man did not believe that such a protective barrier could be easily broken, and he used a strong movement of the object along with the destruction of the barrier. The guy said there was nothing special about it. They were just too weak. The man spoke of defeating the heroes. As the overseer of the shelter, he allows them to take the demigod formula. The frightening mana looked familiar. Guy said there was no room for error. This was pure magic. He wanted to know more and more about them. The creature tells its minions to kill it. As the overseer of this refuge, it allows them to take the form of a demigod. The robed creatures agree with the words of the overseer. All the people in robes are tense. Someone feels a strong increase in mana and asks Guy if this is normal. He thinks that they want to increase their power through their ultimate magic, so he just suggests watching. Suddenly, people grow fangs and claws. Everyone looks at this with fear. The claws become long. An ominous aura hovers around them. The guy asks to tell Iris if they remind her of anyone. The girl asks if they are demons, after which the guy is surprised. In this world, there are creatures called demons. Although they look human, their thinking is fundamentally different. They are completely hostile to others, and their origins remain unknown. The boy imagines demons with horns, wings, and claws. The girl asks Guy why the demons appear, but he doesn't know, because they are a little different from all the demons he has ever fought before, so he will need to find traces of transcendental magic here. In any case, in order to look for something, you first need to calm them all down, but there are quite a lot of them here. The guy begins to stretch his hands. The guy next to the people in robes tells them that it is commendable that they did not run away. One of them starts to growl. His veins pop out. The guy looks at him and wonders if he's been swallowed. Suddenly the man's eyes turn black, and he screams. The guy reports that the transcendental magic used to increase strength changes the soul. Apparently, this guy's soul couldn't handle it, and he continues to change. The girl asks what will happen to him next, and the guy admits that she knows better what she thinks about. That guy turns out to be the demon from whom everyone moved away, with huge horns. The transcendental magic merged with his soul. It seems that yes, this is how demons are created. So, Yuril was right. But the girl reports that now seems to be no time for reflection. He agrees. But despite his appearance, he is not very strong. Suddenly, the demon begins to growl at them. It seems that when you can't keep your mind during the transformation, and what's the point of this action if you end up attacking your own allies, this can be attributed to the difficulty of using transcendental magic. The girl suggests that Guy return from his thoughts. The boy in front of them begins to burn, wondering if this is another failure. Guy realizes he's channeling transcendental magic to shapeshift and transform. Then the man makes one swing of his hand and kills the demon in front of him. Everyone is surprised that even though he was his ally, he was dealt with in one blow. It all becomes clear to Guy, which means that by distorting the soul, one can also change one's body. So that's how they use transcendental magic. He apologizes to everyone for making them wait. Guy stands calmly in front of him. He says that it's okay, because he showed him something interesting in return. But what now? Will he show them his abilities in battle? He can't wait for this. He asks if this is what they really want. The girl tells Guy that he is certainly strong, but the number of opponents is insane. The main character asks her not to worry because he dispelled their barrier. He says that if they suddenly turn out to be stronger, then they will simply run away. The girl understands this, and the guy next to her calls Guy prudent. The demon-controlling man asks if they're expecting a fight with him, if they're completely out of their minds with fear, and if there's nothing they can do. He begins attacking and declares he'll make them pay for invading here. However, suddenly his hand crashes into the barrier in front of the main character. The enemy realizes that he is quite strong. Guy reports that he thought that he was stronger. After this, he demands not to look down on him, and he begins to destroy the barrier with his hand. The protagonist is shocked to see that he was able to break through his barrier just a little bit, even though it took so long. He is already out of breath and orders his minions to move forward. Everyone rushes at the main character and his friends at the same time, trying to destroy the barrier. The enemy thinks that it's not bad, but how long will his calm last? The girl asks Guy if he could strengthen the barrier better, but he simply sighs and asks why. She asks why not. He admits that he is disappointed, which surprises the girl. Guy always thought of transcendental magic as a tool that could enhance magic, but they just use it as a weapon. Not that it's bad, but if this is their maximum level of enhancement, then normal magic will be even better. The boy asks him if he's disappointed because the enemies are too weak. He admits he is, as he had placed more hope in transcendental magic from the start. The girl, however, doesn't think that now is the time for discussion. The girl says that he also has such magic, so why can't he become stronger than them? Suddenly, the protagonist agrees with this and says that he forgot about it. Then, he wants to try to imitate them. He asks about something that seemed to be like that, after which his hand becomes like a demon's, which surprises everyone, even the enemies themselves. The boy asks Guy if he will be able to become normal later, and he says that yes, especially since it will be very inconvenient for him to use this hand in everyday life. Many functions of the human body are supported by magic, and magic is made up of mana. It seems that the Brotherhood reduces the mana supply when they distort the soul, thereby allowing the transcendental magic to eat part of the soul and strengthen the body. But why give up the soul when you can give up the mana? But if you restore the flow of mana in the body, then the transformation will be cancelled. He understood this, and it is interesting. As he thought, he still has a lot to learn about magic. People are surprised that he is a demigod, and who he is. He understands that he definitely cannot be left alive, and they begin to attack the barrier. Suddenly, the barrier is broken, and the enemy orders everyone to kill him and take back what he stole. The girl excitedly shouts out the boy's name. Then they all surround the main character. But suddenly, some kind of explosion occurs, causing the enemies to fly apart. The main character stands up and says that it was a bit weak. Is he even trying to fight? Or what? Everyone is shocked by this. The enemy orders his minions to attack him and kill him, but not to attack him all at once. The main character calmly dodges the blow of one of them and deals with two at once. The protagonist looks at his enemies and begins to understand how to use this power. The main character then makes a circular attack and kills several of his enemies at once. Then he calmly walks towards the others. The enemy thinks in horror that this cannot be. He uses this power flawlessly, not a single unnecessary movement. However, Guy himself would not say so, rather it is just his body moving on its own. His friends are surprised by this. Although he spent mana on the transformation, and his strength increased, but the extreme magic does not allow him to control it completely. This is not bad if their goal is to quickly teach the soldiers to fight. Their enemy flawlessly uses the power of a demigod. Did he steal their technology? Does this mean that he destroyed their test lab? Is he trying to achieve the power of demigods? The protagonist understands that they don't understand, that he has no desire to explain anything to them, but now he knows that they maintain contact with all their shelters. He needs to take note of this. Guy reports that this force is not as powerful as he thought. The girl in shock asks how this is possible. The protagonist admits that he has learned to sense this force, and that it hates people to the point of horror. All three of his friends are surprised by this fact. The main character says that it seems that this transcendental magic recognizes people as enemies. This is the reason why demons are hostile to people. He also tries to cast spells with transcendental magic, but for some reason his mana and the mana of transcendental magic interfere with each other. For this reason, the casting time of the spells has increased. Everyone is watching him. He closes his eyes and realizes that she moves on her own and is hostile to people. The increased casting time of spells. Guy is disappointed by all of this. However, he has already managed to understand most of it, so it's time to end these experiments. The enemies look at the guy in bewilderment. The leader of them informs him that if his demigod power is gone, such a pathetic fake can never compare to real magic. He orders his minions to kill them all to the last one. They rush into battle with the main character's group and shout to them that they are finished. All three are on guard. The protagonist stands and sighs, asking them if they understand that they are now controlled by transcendental magic, and they are seriously using such a disadvantage in a real fight. Suddenly something happens and the main character defeats the enemies. He turns to the main one and asks to look, asking how he feels about it, but he is shocked and thinks that this cannot be. The guy reports that because they don't control themselves, even he, with the first mark, has enough time to cast spells, and yet, using his own magic is much more pleasant. While the transcendental magic is too difficult to use, the main character uses a quantum explosion and several enemies immediately explode. The remaining guy watches in horror as his allies die, and asks how it was possible, how with the power of a demigod they managed to lose to them. The main character says with a smile that this is a normal difference in knowledge of magic. That is the whole reason. Suddenly, someone behind him shouts at the boy to stop. One of the enemies has taken the girl hostage and demands that they give up what they stole or he will kill her. They realize he took Iris. The boy smiles, thinking how brave he was to take her hostage. Guy let one of them escape, but he never thought he'd want to return to the battlefield. The guy tells Guy about the enemy's claws, but Guy asks him not to worry. He assures that everything will be fine with Iris. The guy who took Iris hostage angrily asks them what they are whispering about. Don't they understand that he can kill their comrade right now? The main character really wants to ask him if he knows who he is holding in his hands now, I wonder. And if she transforms, what a surprise he will have, because suddenly a dragon will appear in front of him. The girl looks at the kidnapper in bewilderment and asks why the enemy is trying to command them. The shocked boy asks them what's wrong with them, where their common sense has gone. He says that if they want it, then let them get what they deserve, and then he sharply attacks Iris. However, suddenly all of his claws break, which he watches in horror. The girl angrily informs him that, by the way, she is in pain. Suddenly, she throws the guy straight up into the air, and he screams. The enemy wonders how she managed to throw a grown man without much effort. He's a monster, not a child. The protagonist thinks that technically she is a monster, but as he's realized, most opponents judge her only by her appearance, and the girl asks them to defend themselves. After these words, she strikes her weapon directly at her enemy. She is serious. The enemy is shocked, thinking about what it is and where she got so much mana from. The man she hit with a spear flew far into the wall. The boy sighs calmly, and Guy smiles as he reflects that the demigod the enemies spoke of turned out to be weaker than the dragon after all. They approach the surviving boy and inform him that he is the only one left alive. Guy asks him what he will do. He stands calmly and suddenly, a flame appears on his shoulders. The main character is suddenly surprised by some feeling. The protagonist looks closely at his enemy and thinks that this is all strange. He looks like he's in a hurry to do something, but he does not feel his mana movement. Guy is thinking about what he is trying to do. Does he want to lower their guard? If so, then he must have some way to use it against them. Suddenly his shoulder lights up, and the protagonist is surprised. He shouts to all his partners that they should all immediately step back. They are all confused, and after that some kind of flash appears in place of the enemy. After this, some kind of magical pillar hits them directly, but they all manage to jump back. The main character asks everyone if they are safe. Everyone answers that they are safe, everything worked out. The girl thinks about what just happened. The main character looks at the crack in the floor and understands that it is most likely a cutting spell. The entire building is destroyed by this attack. The main character thinks with a smile that this attack was beautiful, not so much for its power, but for its lightning speed. Usually when you cast a spell, mana moves through the body and this can be noticed, and he managed to do it in an instant. Was this also incredible magic? He tells the enemy that he knows that he no longer remembers the last time he had to dodge a common man's spell. He asks him if it was transcendental magic. However, he just stands there and remains silent, and they do not understand why he suddenly became quiet. The guy thinks that maybe he is preparing another attack. Iris is surprised by this. They need to be on guard and prepare to dodge. They cannot defend themselves from this. The protagonist agrees with this, because even he cannot protect himself from it, although he put up a barrier, but it simply smashed him to pieces. The girl asks him if he always walks with a barrier. The protagonist admits that yes, because who knows when he will be attacked, so he always walks with a barrier. He asks his enemy to show him a couple more of these tricks, and creates the spell himself. Guy uses a spatial spear. This spell includes 2 techniques at once, and if you keep it simple, then not even a speck of dust will remain from the dragon. He asks the enemy what he will do now. He sends his spear straight at the enemy, but it fails to hurt him, and Guy smiles as he realizes that he thought it wouldn't work on him. Suddenly, the main character's spear is destroyed. He realizes that the other mana was able to repel his technique with just his mana, but now he is strong, and his actions are honed to perfection. The girl excitedly tells the guy that his spell contained a colossal amount of mana, and even though they all raised their barriers, they are completely powerless from now on. The main character wonders if he has finally found a worthy rival. It seems like 130 years have passed since the last one. The enemy reports that it is hard to even think that all these guys will lose, because they called themselves demigods. But who is he then? After all, unlike all of them, he retained his former appearance, and yes, this power simply overwhelms him. Everyone thinks he looks scary. He doesn't know who he is, but he managed to get him interested. The guy shows them his clawed hand, and asks Guy not to worry. He doesn't have to answer, because he's going to die soon anyway. After all, the price of such power turns out to be too high. He suddenly disappears from sight, and appears right in front of them. The guy is surprised by this, but manages to block the blow with the sword, but notices that it is starting to break. He calls the enemy a bastard, but the protagonist suddenly creates some kind of spell with both hands. Suddenly, he finishes his attack, but the barrier prevents him from defeating the guy, causing him to bounce back. The protagonist holds a cracked barrier in front of him and tells him that he is strong, and much stronger than the demigod, who tells Guy that he doesn't even use transcendental magic, but he can block his attacks. While he is protected by a barrier, he tries to kill him without a spell. But even the lack of oxygen or the draining of mana has no effect. The girl nervously turns to the guy, but he orders the 3 of them not to come here. He asks Iris to take the form of a dragon, take everyone and fly away. They need to stay as far away from this guy as possible. The girl apologizes for being a burden. The boy apologizes for being weak here. And Iris obediently accepts the order and begins to transform into a dragon. The boy and girl fly away on the dragon, shouting at Guy to take care of himself. The enemy says that anyone other than them who knows about the transcendental magic must die, and he sends an attack after the dragon. However, the protagonist states that he cannot let his comrades die, and casts a spell, repelling the enemy's attacks with his own into the wall. He asks Guy in shock who he is, and the protagonist, smiling, takes out a weapon from the magical space. Suddenly he rushes at Guy and says that then he will have to kill him first, although he is good at magic, but in close combat he is weak. He attacks Guy, but he easily dodges. The protagonist suddenly appears in the air and asks the enemy what he wanted from the first mark. He attacks him and asks him not to worry, because he has already taken care of close combat. He holds his sword with his palms and says with a smile that it's not bad. Suddenly he attacks him with his foot and asks how he likes it. Guy calmly apologizes for not foreseeing such a move. It seems that he has never fought in this form before, otherwise he cannot explain why he is defending himself with such strength. It seems that transcendental magic is not omnipotent after all. They fly away from each other, and the enemy tells Guy that he is very annoying, but now he will definitely not run away anywhere. The protagonist doesn't understand what he's talking about. He was only buying time for Iris and the others to escape, so why would he think he wants to escape? Guy asks the enemy if he needs their belongings returned, but they're in his magical vault. He says that this is great, because he will be able to take them after his death. He asks him if he thinks that he will succeed, because even if Guy dies, he still will not be able to break through his barrier. The protagonist thinks that he clearly wants to take back what he took, which means it is important, but he does not try to take it from him. Guy does not understand what his rival is planning. After this, Guy asks him what he is waiting for, whether he is thinking about how to hack his vault, or whether he is thinking that it will be easier for him to do this with his death. The protagonist doesn't sense his friend's presence and thinks they're already far away. The enemy asks him if his friend seems safe, and Guy asks if he's been waiting for him. He denies this and admits that he was simply wondering why he was wasting time. He believes that his comrades are dear to him since he let them go. He says with a smile that yes, and he doesn't even imagine how much, since they have nothing more to lose, then they can continue. The enemy agrees, as he has already surpassed the power of the demigod, but is very happy. Happy about their fateful meeting, because now he can fight for his own pleasure. He punches each other and says that he doesn't know which of them is stronger, but they will fight with all their might. The main character is surprised by this and says that he didn't expect this. Is he one of those guys who loves fighting? He asks Guy about that. Isn't he like that? Guy honestly admits that he is like that himself, and fighting a strong, unknown opponent brings him great pleasure. Then the enemy prepares an attack, and a little later, attacks the main character, asking him not to be stupid. Does he think that he will allow him to continue talking? He loves killing more than fighting. There is nothing more pleasant than killing enemies. However, the protagonist stands on his feet and tells him that he knew he would attack when he let his guard down, and has long since realized that he likes to kill. Guy asks him if all members of his brotherhood are like that. However, to be honest, his attack surprised the protagonist, who admits that he is clearly good at killing, but he says that he is not a killer and that he is simply good at everything. He is about to attack again, and tells Guy that now he knows everything he is capable of. The power is already overflowing him, and now he is absolutely sure that Guy will lose. The protagonist understands that this is soul-defeating magic, and also a series of blows. He is too confident in his abilities. In his place, he would not think that by becoming a little stronger, he could definitely kill the enemy. He hits the barriers with several blows, telling Guy not to worry, because he will definitely die. Even he cannot resist his magic, because the soul cannot be protected by anything. The protagonist calmly stops his enemy's attack with one finger. He is surprised by this. The main character asks about where his death is. His attacks are becoming weaker and weaker, and his strength, it seems, he is not able to use many spells in a row. The protagonist understands that his time is running out, and he asks if he is right. He also tells his enemy that he is quite strong in a one-on-one fight, but he is still an ordinary killer. He asks for permission to thank him. He asks in shock, why? Guy admits that a lot of time has passed since he had such a battle. The protagonist raises his finger and announces that it is now his turn to attack. Spears appear from several circles. The enemy is shocked and asks not to say that he was preparing a spell while they were fighting. How can he be so strong with the first mark? He asks if he thought that he bought time for his comrades for nothing. This is one of his most powerful spells of destruction magic. After it, there will be nothing left within a radius of 10 kilometers. The protagonist conjures a colossal atomic blade and asks the enemy if he can survive it, who, in shock, calls the guy crazy. Guy yells at his opponent to defend himself. Then he throws a spear straight at him, who tries to stop him, but fails, and an explosion occurs. The enemy stands with both hands outstretched and tense. The protagonist smiles and understands that he decided not to dodge the attack, and that this is commendable. He begins to scream. The protagonist's rival shouts at him not to underestimate him, because now he will show him the full power of his transcendental magic. He strikes the atomic wedge, and an explosion occurs. He stands up and tries to catch his breath, telling Guy that he was saying his transcendental magic is superior to his spells. Guy says that since he's asking, he'll strike with full force, and he's prepared enough of those spells, surprising the enemy. He just dealt with 10% of the main character's strength, but what about 20? Will he reflect the attack? Now they will find out. The enemy hits him. Where did he get so much strength? It's impossible, after which the main character attacks him. The explosion created by the main character can be seen even from space, and his friends on the dragon look back in shock, surprised by this explosion. The dragon Iris is shocked by this blast wave and barely stays in the air, asking her friends to hold on tight. The girl asks if it was the guy who tried. The guy would not want to see his enemies. He does not know what is going on there, because from such a far distance it is generally impossible to determine. The dragon looks at his friends and asks them about what might happen if they return. Guy is still fighting, then maybe they can still help him with something. The girl says that she is all for it, but he sent them here because they are too weak. The guy says that if they fly there, they will die. But what if this explosion was not created by Guy? Suddenly, the dragon hears a voice saying that if Guy dies, she will be free. The dragon asks the girl who she is, and she reveals that she is the evil Iris, her true feelings. She tells Iris that she is a proud black dragon, and she can't believe that she joined the humans. The dragon smilingly tells her that Yuri and Reiter love her. Then the evil Iris asks about Guy. Doesn't he force her to study? She doesn't like it. The dragon says that it is for her good. The evil one says that in any case, if Guy dies, then she will be free, so it's better for her to fly away, or she wants to study again, after which the dragon begins to cry. Reiter notices this and asks Iris what happened to her. She says that she doesn't want to study. Character appears out of thin air and announces with a smile that he has returned, after which Iris becomes very scared. The girl strokes Iris and asks her if she is really okay. She says that yes, but she is scared. Reuters asks Guy if he won, but he denies it with a satisfied grin and states that they won. He is asked about the recent explosion, whether he caused it. The protagonist gives a positive answer and explains that it was his atomic blade. The enemy simply started using soul destruction magic, so he decided to hit him as hard as he could to calm him down, but he overdid it a bit, and there was nothing left of him, and he didn't even hit him with full force. Everyone, in shock, asks the main character if he didn't hit with full force. Guy explains that transcendental magic takes mana from outside, just like strength. It's a pity that he didn't master it perfectly. Maybe then he would have had a chance, but he learned that there are people stronger in the Brotherhood, so he plans to continue their search for the Brotherhood. He tells his friends that he hopes for their help, and they tell him that they will help him. Iris happily flies and reports that no matter how strong their enemies are, as long as they are human, they will definitely not defeat Guy. The main character turns to her and tells her that he is also a human being, and she asks in surprise if this is true, since she always thought that he was some other creature. After this, the guy tells her that from today on, she will also be studying biology. And she, in shock, asks why he is doing this to her. The protagonist looks at Yuri and tells her that they need to report. The girl begins to cast a spell and is asked if this is communication magic, whether they will contact the king now and what they will tell him. The girl tells the king that it is Yuri. She apologizes to him for disturbing him and hopes that he is not busy. The king reports that everything is fine, asks if something happened. She says that nothing urgent. Suddenly, he understands something and asks in surprise what really happened to Guy when he made that strong explosion a few minutes ago, and whether they are now in Orton's kingdom. The protagonist is shocked to realize that the kingdom already knows about his destructive magic, and his intelligence is working very well. Reuters, however, says that the matter is actually different. They made too much noise. The protagonist reports that it is true. He never thought that they could cause such problems for the kingdom. But how did they find out so quickly where the explosion was? Had the Brotherhood already noticed it too? The main character wants to ask the king how they found out about this. The girl decides to try. Yuri turns to the king and apologizes again, asking if his intelligence service had confirmed this information. He denies it. Guy realizes this is something new. The king declares that the information didn't come from them. The request was submitted by the Secret Intelligence Service's Geography Department. All three are surprised by this. The king has a device that maps changes when significant landscape changes occur within the kingdom. And a couple of minutes ago, the device started working and marked a large area. The first thing he thought about was Guy, because no one else could make such a strong explosion. And since that explosion created a new gorge, geographers began to think that Guy had returned, since, according to them, he was the only one who always liked to make such large gorges. He did everything he could to keep his existence from being discovered and tried to stop them, but they didn't believe him and wouldn't let him go. Ultimately, he was forced to tell them all. But he managed to convince them that if it really was Guy, then he himself would have died because of such an explosion. Guy never even knew that there was such a device in the kingdom, and it had been there for at least 100 years, so it turns out they recorded his battles every time. It's pretty funny. Reiter can congratulate him on another gorge and suggests celebrating it. He asks Guy what he thinks. The protagonist reflects and admits that it was his magic, but no one must know of his existence, and in general, they should stop naming gorges after him. It infuriates him. Reiter laughs and says that if he keeps blowing things up like this, everyone will know for sure that he's alive. In any case, since the kingdom knows, then the Brotherhood even more so, Guy reports that they will sooner or later find them themselves. The girl tells the king she's realized something. Reiter thinks that since they destroyed their second shelter, it means they've already increased security elsewhere, but Guy has their secret documents. They were ready to tear them apart with their bare hands for them, so upon arrival he will begin deciphering them. He wants to prepare for the next meeting with the Brotherhood as soon as possible. He also reports that they have almost arrived, and thinks that the king will not mind if he occupies one of his laboratories. The guy tells Iris that their course is the Kingdom of Miles, and she agrees. When they flew into the kingdom on the dragon, many people noticed it. They made a lot of noise, but the king will take care of it, and now it's time to open this box. Then the main character opens the box, and suddenly something flies out of it. It's some kind of scroll. The protagonist asks Iris if she knows what it is, and she's in shock. She wonders if it's a magic circle. The main character looks at her seriously, and the girl asks if she guessed right. But the guy replies that she did guess right. It is a magic circle, but it is embedded in an object. The girl sighs with relief. Some of its parts are missing, and some are mixed up. If something is done wrong during restoration, it will blow up everything here. The girl is shocked by this news. Yuri thoughtfully reports that the code is a magic circle. She will now try to take and compress the magic formula of this circle, but this requires a large amount of mana and a lot of calculations. But if it suddenly works out, then the circle will be deciphered, and they will gain access to the information. Iris thinks that she is tired of their clever penalties. She does not understand anything on an empty stomach. The guy asks Yuri if she knows the Brotherhood code. The girl admits that, unfortunately, she doesn't know, but she saw it a couple of times. They called it the Aegis cipher. The protagonist asks for more details, and Reiter says that, as far as he knows, this is the most complex of all magical ciphers that have ever existed. Yuri agrees with this and states that its encryption and decryption takes a lot of time and effort, which is why it received the title of the most difficult, and Guy has never heard of it. He asks for all the books and notes on ciphers they have. He wants to read them all, and only then begin deciphering them. The girl is shocked that he intends to study all the cipher materials from the last 100 years. The girl says that since they only need to decipher it, then this one will do for them. She takes a book from the magical storage. It is called Brief Descriptions of the Aegis Cipher, Encryption, Decryption, and Compression of Information. The book's author is unknown, and the publisher is the Royal Aegis University. Yuri says they don't know how this cipher came about, but it's very complex. No one has fully understood it for many years, and only the Royal Aegis University knows how to encrypt and decrypt it. Everything becomes clear to the main character. She tried to understand once, but she has too little knowledge and skills. Maybe she will succeed. Now they will find out about it. The protagonist begins to read the book and realizes that its text is very familiar to him. He rummages through his magical storage and thinks about where he put it. He compares two books, and the girl, shocked, asks if he wrote this book. The guy says that it turns out that yes, because they are absolutely identical. Yuri finds it funny. There were a lot of rumors around this book, but now he understands why its author is unknown. He simply did not indicate himself on most of his books. Iris asks the guy if it turns out that he can now decipher the documents, but he apologizes. His code is not so simple even for him, but it's worth a try. Then the protagonist activates the decryption spell, and something starts to happen to this scroll. The protagonist continues to hold the book in his hand, and the girl asks him if he succeeded, if he deciphered the document. Guy reports that he does not know. One should never be sure that he has deciphered the document completely. The sentences of the word are quite readable. He reports that there is a shelter marked below, whether they were there the first time. Reuters reports that this is it. It is located where they were. Everyone is thinking about what he managed to decipher. He says that it seems so, but it wasn't a cipher, but rather information compression, and it was difficult to decipher even though no code was used. But to decipher this cipher, they need a key, a special magic circle. Guy says a circle with 1,000,000 lines worked for the documents. He used an arithmetic magic circle. If combined with deciphering magic, it would take about 5 seconds. Yuri, shocked, asks him if he understands that no one alive today can do this. Iris says that she doesn't understand what they are talking about. The main thing is that the document has been deciphered and shows the locations of the Brotherhood's hideouts, and they are reliable. Although he's more interested in something else. The Brotherhood's origins. That's what he wants to know most. The one he fought with. It says here that he is the 8th experiment in breeding a demigod, which means there are at least 7 more like him. They conduct various experiments on people to create a demigod. The first is soul change. He and Yuri fall under its description. It is the simplest, and it is carried out in every shelter of the Brotherhood. Since they have a map of all their shelters, she doesn't even know where to start. It turns out that their goal is to destroy all the shelters. But he'd like to destroy them all at once. Iris is shocked by this. And even though they're planning to get rid of them, he'd like to gather as much information as possible about the soul change and why they don't destroy them with magic. Guy says that in this case chaos will reign, other kingdoms will find out where the shot was fired from, and this will cause a series of wars. So it is better to destroy them one by one, and they will start from the place that he showed on the map. The coast of the Miles Kingdom, whether it is a branch of Gears, they have their refuge nearby. Apparently, it is on an island, so there will be no need to worry about neighboring countries. It also says here that it is even bigger than their main shelter, which means there must be something interesting there. The protagonist suggests they set out as soon as possible, preferably now, but first they'll stop by the workshop. The girl is surprised that he has one. Reiter is interested in what is there, whether there is an incredible amount of national treasure, a lot of bright sparkles. The main character says that he guessed correctly, and besides, they are already here. He wants to make weapons for both of them. After all, from this moment on they will have many battles. The girl is surprised that he will make it for them personally. They call him the best. The protagonist says that he would like to go straight to the Seraphim Society branch, but before doing so, he needs to prepare some things. First, they will head to the workshop. The girl thinks that he has his own workshop. Reiter thinks that there are probably many items of national significance there. Iris thinks that it is full of treasures. After Guy says he will create weapons for them, the girl says that this is great, because they will both become much stronger. Iris thinks that it's good that now it's Yuri and Reiter's turn. It looks like she won't have to do anything for a while. The girl turns to Iris and tells her that everything is clear from her face. Reiter says that in such moments, something dangerous usually happens. Iris agrees to leave immediately in this case. She offers to move them all again. But the protagonist remains silent. He asks everyone to stand. Iris is shocked by this. And Guy tells her that if Yuri and Reiter get new weapons and become stronger, then Iris. The girl suddenly tells him something she completely forgot. The guy asks her what she is talking about. The girl is confused, and he asks what she forgot. The girl says that they agreed that she would study and keep her promises. The protagonist is surprised that she actually remembers this, but she is truly very sorry. She apologizes for destroying that strange mechanism with her sneezing. She remembers that situation. Guy says that it wasn't because of her sneezing, it was because the mechanism was aging. It just got out of control due to wear and tear. The girl is relieved to realize that she doesn't have to study. The main character looks at her in bewilderment and asks about the importance of control over magical power. The girl is shocked. He says that this time it was an accident. But what if her fire strike accidentally hits a comrade during the fight? Besides, she has great strength to begin with, so if she learns to control magic, she will significantly improve her abilities. Compared to how weaker people train to become stronger, it will be much easier for her. Yuri strokes the girl's head and tells her that Guy simply has high hopes for her. The girl reports that she understood, but she is confident that she can learn even if she tries. The main character asks her not to worry. He already has a plan. They need to change the location. The girl has a premonition that everything will be bad. They are in the garden at a table, and the protagonist is drinking tea, saying that, in his opinion, Iris knows too little about basic things. He tells her that what she probably means is that he doesn't have a huge amount of knowledge, but in his case, he spent about 100 years in research without contact with the outside world. So he's simply not up to date with the latest developments, and it's not that hard to correct that misunderstanding. Yuri wants to say something, and Guy asks her. She thinks that Guy lacks knowledge, not only because he does not know about the latest events. He asks if this is true. She tells him that he has a different perception of people. For Guy, it sounds abstract, but Reiter laughs and understands her meaning. She says that, if we take an example, The elbow joint in humans bends only inward. However, Mr. Guy thinks that if he tries hard, he can bend it outward. The main character asks about that, but isn't that possible? It might hurt a little. He imagines breaking his elbow with magic. The girl says that this is not usually done. Iris says that it is a little painful. Guy says that they say that experienced spies can dislocate all the joints in their body. Yuri says that this goes beyond common sense. The girl thinks that it was this unconventional thinking that made Guy so strong, and there is something worthy of respect in this, but now he himself is confused, whether he is criticized or praised. In any case, he wants to say that Iris should study the basic knowledge better. Iris reports that she understood what he was getting at, and she thought the conversation had already gone in a different direction. Guy believes that we need to start with mathematics. Reuters reports that it would be more accurate to say, with arithmetic. The protagonist accepts his correction and informs him that there are several teachings that underlie magic, but the one most closely connected with it is arithmetic, and the protagonist creates a magic circle. The amount of magical power used to control magic, the output power obtained from this amount of magical power, magic consists of countless interweaving of numbers. It is important to get used to the fact that you need to translate the amount of magical power into numbers. Yuril reports that she understands everything, and finds it all very informative. Let's say a spell requires 50 units of magic power, and he uses only 40. In Iris's case, she adds and uses about 30, so the magic gets out of control. But in reality, she uses about 300, and suddenly, the girl is shocked by their reasoning. Reiter cools the girl's head with ice water and tells Guy that he should slow down. Iris is already overloaded, and they haven't even started yet, starting from the very basics. The protagonist asks the girl if she knows numbers. The girl says that she knows, it's what is used to count food, she smiles. The protagonist asks her to solve it, and some kind of scroll appears in his hands. He unfolds the paper, and there is a math problem written on it. It is easy, but the girl is stupefied by it. The girl examines the paper for a while and turns it over in her hands, then asks the main character what kind of cross it is, meaning a plus sign. The protagonist's face darkened at the girl's question, and Reiter began to laugh out loud, saying that it was definitely a cross. Yuri calmly explains to the girl that this is not a cross, but a plus sign, after which the girl happily understands everything and says that this is called addition. Reiter is surprised that she understands this. She proudly says that no dragon would know such a thing. The main character stands with an example on paper and asks her if she then understands what it means. The main character asks about the meaning of this problem. The girl starts thinking. She realizes that she needs to add 5 and 6. The girl gives the example of buns and asks how many there are together when there are 5 and 6 buns. The main character says that this is a correct comparison. He asks the girl what the final answer is, how many of these buns she will have in total. Iris starts thinking about the buns in her head, about how she will fold them, but suddenly in her thoughts, she is in the form of a dragon eating them all. The girl suddenly declares that if you eat them all, there will be 0 buns left, which makes all 3 of them look gloomy. The protagonist angrily and smilingly asks not to eat them while he counts. The girl asks in surprise if they can't be eaten. Yuri explains that the question is how many buns there are before she eats them all. No one says such things in the answer to addition. The girl tearfully understands that she can't eat, but Yuri calmly says that after she does the calculations, she will be able to. Night had already fallen, but they were all sitting together at the table, and the girl was still thinking about the example. She suddenly announces that she has understood everything. She starts writing something on paper. Then she shows that her answer is a lot. All 3 are in shock again. The main character realizes that she didn't have enough fingers to count correctly. The girl anxiously asks if this is wrong. Yuri informs her that the answer should be some kind of number. Yuri says that she has 5 buns and shows her fingers. Then she adds 6 more, 5 with her fingers and 1 with Reiter's finger. They ask her how many there will be in total. The girl looked at their hands for a moment and happily announced that there would be 11 in total, and everyone was happy about it. She thinks that she seems to have begun to understand mathematics a little. Yuri asks her if it becomes more fun when she understands. She hesitantly says that it probably does. Then the main character starts talking about multiplication. The next thing she has to learn is multiplication of numbers. Everyone turns to Guy in surprise and asks him why they suddenly switched to multiplication. The main character asks if it wouldn't be better to explain multiplication more clearly, Who would have thought that teaching a dragon arithmetic would be so difficult? He begins to cast a spell and announces that this may be one of the most difficult tasks in the history of magical education. Reiter thinks that something has definitely snapped in the guy. Guy says that whether Iris learns magic will greatly affect the combat power of their team. But if she succeeds, it will be a huge leap. It's worth trying. Reiter thinks with a smile that this is completely hopeless. He is not at all in the mood to listen to them. A huge writing board appears in front of the main character. The main character writes an example of multiplication of 5 by 5 in chalk and tells Iris that it is multiplication. The girl looks closely at the board and asks if it is 5 by 5, but the main character says that it is multiplication, 5 times 5. The main character asks the girl to imagine 5 apples on one tree. He asks her how many apples there will be if there are 5 such trees. Then the girl starts looking around and says that there are no trees with apples. The main character understands and takes something out of the magical storage. Even Yuri asks him what it is. The protagonist takes out apple seeds and plants them in the ground, and then he uses growth acceleration magic on these seeds. First, a small sprout appeared, which surprised everyone. Then a tree began to grow and there were only 5 of them. The girl beamed when she saw the apple trees. Reiter, surprised, asked if growth acceleration wasn't a high-level control magic, requiring precise control of magical power. Yuri explained that it usually takes several weeks to use, but he had used it so quickly. The protagonist says that yes, he simply perfected this magic, and they are surprised that it is so simple. The protagonist asks Iris if she knows the answer, and the girl says with a smile that she does. The answer is 25. Iris is very happy that she was praised when they told her that everything was right and she can do anything. The protagonist announces that now is the next example. He asks Iris if she can solve this one. He writes the example. 7 multiplied by 4. The girl thinks about what it means to have 4 trees with 7 apples each, but there are only 5 apples there. The main character asks her to wait. He is casting some kind of spell. Then he creates more apples on the trees and cuts down one of them. The girl stands in front of the trees. The main character asks her if this will work. How many apples are there? The girl turns around and with an apple in her mouth, indistinctly says that there are 27 of them. The guy asks her what she has in her mouth. She says it's an apple, but she needs to name the number of apples before she eats them. How many are there then? She thinks there were 27 of them, but she ate one of them, in which case there were 28 of them. Late at night, she sits and eats apples. The protagonist realized that teaching her arithmetic would not be easy. Reiter says there is no need to rush. If she masters magical control, she will become invincible and can develop the magic of automatic learning of mathematics. He reports that there is nothing they can do, and they will have to, as they planned, start by making weapons for Yuri and Reiter.